Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf, Rotary Street. RotaryJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here with our usual 4 p.m. Monday draft show. So pumped to dive into our topic today before we get drafting, and that is going to be who we see as the top best ball values. Free agency is, for the most part, all settled. The dust has really just settled down, and we can kind of dive into now what are the right ADPs and where do we see some mismatches here, and especially in terms of who we want to be drafting, what values can we be capitalizing on as we start to draft here. Of course, once the actual NFL draft hits, that's going to shake everything back up. We'll have to kind of reevaluate and reestablish our top favorite values, but man, it's still very exciting. And this NFL big board contest that Underdog runs actually ends at the draft. So these values right now aren't going to be the same values we're discussing in just a month and a half or so once the draft hits and we're doing BBM. So I am stoked to draft and just dive into these early big board best ball values with my man, as always, Mo. How we doing today, brother?
Not too bad. Life's been consumed with college basketball a little bit these last couple of days. I'm sure it has been for you to a degree. But like you said, ADPs are settling out from free agency, and it's our last chance to get some value, especially on these rookies before everything shakes up after the real NFL draft. So I'm looking forward to taking some stabs on some rookies, hopefully, in this draft that we're going to do today, and taking advantage of some ADPs that I think are a little off. We're going to get a little bit further into that, but I think there's some great players that you can grab. I think their ADPs will be shooting up throughout the summer. So let's take advantage of those now.
Absolutely. And we'll dive right into it. Wolfpack, if you enjoy at any point what you hear, that thumbs up button, like, shares, retweets, all that good stuff really does greatly help us continue to grow and get out to more people. So thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're willing to, we'd love to keep getting out to more people with your help. We'll start at the top, and you actually stole mine from me, Mo, so I had to come up with a new one here. That means we both are in agreement that Dak Prescott is a screaming bargain here in early fantasy drafts. Why don't you spin your take on him? I might have a few additions by the end, but I agree with you completely. The best value right now at quarterback, someone I'm trying to bump my exposure to, whether I have CeeDee Lamb or not, is Dak Prescott. Let's jump in right now.
Yeah, Dak Prescott, we talked about it during the last draft that we did last Monday. And it's someone that's kind of scratch your head, like, why is he so low? 2023, Dak had one of his best seasons of his career, and I think it's pretty close to his fantasy ceiling that we're going to see. He was the overall QB3 and the QB4 by points per game, but now he's being drafted as the QB8 in the middle of the 7th round. He's going behind Joe Burrow, and I kind of put those guys in the same pool of quarterback caliber, or in terms of fantasy performance, quarterback caliber. Those elite pocket passers who can get a lot of touchdowns, but I don't really see the price on QB8 for Dak Prescott. I mean, we saw towards the end of the year last year that this offense funnels through Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb with a really high pass rate. I'm just gonna go through some numbers here on how that Dallas offense changed throughout the year last year. Early on in the season, really not low pass rate, but wasn't anything to really shock you by any means. But after the week 7 bye, they were 4th in pass rate over expectation. We saw a massive jump after that bye, and we saw Dak finish the season 4th in overall attempts in the NFL, and CeeDee Lamb, that target monster. Dak was highly efficient as well during this time frame. He was 2nd in EPA per play and 6th in completion percentage over expectation. So he's getting a lot of chances to throw the ball, and he's being efficient and doing well with them. His turnover-worthy plays were among the lowest in the league. He's a quality quarterback, whether you like it or not. He's capable of putting the ball where it needs to be, getting the ball to his receivers, and I just think with his high volume and solid efficiency, this is where this Dallas offense is going. Very pass heavy. They didn't bring in another running back after losing Tony Pollard. They definitely will. You're not going to run into this season with possibly Rico Dowdle being your number 1 guy. That's just not going to happen. I know we talked about him being a free agent, but everything's pointed to this high pass rate continuing for the Dallas offense. And I think Dak is great for another 4,000 yards, 4,500 potentially, like we saw last season, and another 30 touchdowns. I just don't see the QB8 price.
Yeah, I don't understand at all. In fact, to add some more to what you talked about, after that week 7 bye, Dak was the QB1 in fantasy, averaged over 24 fantasy points per game, was more than Josh Allen in that span, first in overall passing touchdowns and third in yards, third in quarterback points overall. Despite 6 games, the first 6 games, he was averaging 14.6 fantasy points per game, was the QB 22 to start the season in those first 6. So you're having a borderline, people were dropping Dak in some of my leagues, borderline useless start to the year, and then he finishes so hot that he was the QB1 in that span, and yet he's, like you said, going QB8 makes no sense to me. I don't mind drafting him naked either. Of course, you'd like to have CeeDee Lamb stacking with Ferguson or Brandon Cooks. It's nice, but I love it. And yeah, you mentioned this is probably the ceiling, but there was, it was a few years ago, but man, Dak had like 40, it was insane where he was averaging like 35 fantasy points per game for a 4-game stretch. And then he got hurt. He broke his leg and it was brutal to see, but he was on pace for to win the MVP that year. Like we've seen Dak have these type of huge ceiling days. And I don't think this is anything to be shocked about. Like you said, I think it's going to carry over into next year. 82% of his final 11 games were a top 12 performance. I'm a big fan of him. My quarterback value is similarly somebody that finished hotter than they started, and that's Matthew Stafford. He's going as the quarterback 19 right now. He had a absurdly low touchdown rate to start the season. Over the first 8 games, a ridiculous 8 touchdowns. That's it. 1 touchdown per game was what Matthew Stafford was averaging. Then he got hurt for 2. Then the bye week happens. Comes back after week 11. In 7 games after week 11, he had 17 touchdowns, more than doubled what he had in the first 8 games. Didn't have a single top 12 game until week 12. And then 4 of his final 6 were 20-plus points, were top 12 performances. He was the quarterback 6 to close out the year for those final 6 games. And it's not like he can't throw touchdowns. He had 41 of them, was second among quarterbacks just 2 years ago when he first got to the Rams, was quarterback 5 in fantasy that year. And why did he finish the year so much hotter? Well, part of it, yeah, sure, was matchups. He had some easy schedule slates there to close the year. But he also finally had Puka and Kupp back together. And maybe Kupp wasn't fully healthy in that span, but he certainly was better than the Cooper Kupp we saw for the first 2/3 of the year. And Puka really had come into his own. And I don't see any reason they can't just carry that hot, scorching end to the season right over into 2024 fantasy here. And at least at the quarterback 19 price with definite top 12 upside, I think that is a great buy with Matthew Stafford. I'm definitely all in on that price. What are your thoughts there, Mo?
I agree. I'm just thinking back to last season. I remember, I don't remember the exact threshold in the season where it was, but I remember writing it early in the year during my trade value chart piece about Stafford's touchdown rate. It was just unsustainable low, which we're not typically seeing with a quarterback like Stafford. But I agree. And once we didn't see too much of Puka and Kupp on the field at the same time until down the stretch, and that was when he was performing at his best. So I agree, as a bench quarterback, as a low-end QB2, I don't see why not. I think you can get he has that ceiling with those high touchdown numbers, and this offense, while Kyron Williams has been great, was great last season, this still runs through Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So at the price, I agree. I don't think Stafford is going to be some game-changing quarterback for fantasy this year. He never really will be, considering his age. But and for his current price, I'm with you.
Again, quarterback 5 just 2 seasons ago, and now might have the best weapons of his career, though. Maybe he could be game-changing, and at minimum, too. I agree. I'd much rather be my QB2, certainly as a stacking partner if I've gotten Puka, Kupp, whoever. But he's that kind of the cutoff, and that's why I wanted to highlight him, too, before we move to running backs, is like if I've been waiting on quarterback, that's been my strategy this draft, or just kind of how it's unfolded. He's kind of that last guy in that quarterback 15 to 20 range where I could accept him as my QB1 and then balance him out with some upside rookies like Jaden Daniels and Drake May and maybe Will Levis later in the draft. But a 3 QB build, if he's my number 1 guy, I'm okay with that. That's kind of my cutoff point because I really could see out of all the guys that go in that range, he's the one that if he finished top 10 wouldn't shock me at all this season. Moving on now to running backs, and you have Josh Jacobs at the top of this. He is a riser right now in drafts, but at times he still does kind of fall. His ADP right now is 38. I typically see him go closer to the 2-3 turn rather than the 3-4 turn that price suggests, but I still could see a ton of value coming from Josh Jacobs now with this ascending Packers offense. What's your case for him as one of the best values in fantasy?
Yeah, so like you said, currently a rising ADP, just given the fact that he's shifting from that less than desirable Vegas offense over to the young and blossoming Packers offense. But like you said earlier, with a price listed around pick 38 right now, that's what I'm interested in is his price. I'm not super like Josh Jacobs as a running back, as a player, doesn't really get me going. But I think his efficiency last year wasn't great. His yards after contact, his missed tackles forced, some of those key factors that you're looking for when you're evaluating running backs, they weren't great last year. He was middle of the pack towards the bottom of the barrel, but he's been proven capable of handling a 3-down workload. He did it in Las Vegas. He got banged up at the end of the year last year, but it was just a quad bruise, so I'm not too worried about that. He's heading over to Green Bay, and all the signs are pointing to him handling the entirety of the workload. I'm not really scared of him losing this job. I mean, we know what A.J. Dillon is at this point. He's a pretty boring, nothing plotter. He'll eat up carries here and there, but I don't think the Packers at this point are trying to make him any sort of featured part of this offense. He'll just come on the field when they feel it's appropriate for Jacobs to get a break. But I think Jacobs is going to handle the vast majority of this workload, and I think people are going to agree with me with that. And taking part, investing in big part of one of the better offenses and upcoming offenses in the league, I'm interested in. And with a current price at the 3-4 turn, I want to buy now. I see the path already. Josh Jacobs getting steamed all the way up to the second round just because he's the bell cow back on a young, good offense. We've seen it happen offseason after offseason. I can already see it happening. Josh Jacobs is going to be going pick 24 to pick 28. I'm a little bit more comfortable getting Josh Jacobs at the 3-4 turn where he is now. And I know I want some Josh Jacobs in my portfolio when the summer wraps up and the regular season is here. And I think this is the best opportunity to get him.
Yeah, and I think one of the things working in his favor too, as compared to Jones, and Jones, obviously, I love Aaron Jones, phenomenal back, and was a pretty good touchdown scorer, but like there was the case to take off Aaron Jones for A.J. Dillon, given the size of Dillon and the big bullish nature of him. Jacobs is that same style build and phenomenal at the stripe. So assuming that he doesn't lose that goal line work to A.J. Dillon, an offense that put up over 30 points in 5 of their last 8 games, I really think this is a great situation for Josh Jacobs. We talked about it just 2 episodes ago, that he was probably the single biggest winner of free agency, other than maybe those weapons in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins going there. So yeah, I'm with you. If we can get him in that 3rd, 4th turn, love it. As he gets steamed up, though, I'm a little cautious myself. My first running back I want to highlight, we're going to do 2 running backs each, is Kenneth Walker. And there's not a huge case because he's been the running back 18, running back 20 to start his career at 1,000 yards as a rookie. Took a little bit of a back step as a sophomore in terms of overall yardage, but I still love him at his RB15 price. So obviously I'm projecting him to take a step forward than what we've seen these last few years. And why? Well, one, I love new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb. I love when you get an innovative college mind to come in and kind of shake things up. But what I really love about Grubb is he started as an offensive line coach, and those type of guys, and he's already talked about in his opening interviews, run game presence. Don't forget that Mike McDonald, the new head coach, comes from the Ravens, and nobody has run the ball, seen the value of running the rock, setting up that foundation for play action, all that good stuff, than the Ravens. So I imagine this is going to be a much heavier run team, and I think Kenneth Walker is going to be the bell cow. We saw Charbonnet get his shot for a couple games there where Walker missed, and he just didn't flash all that much. And Walker himself, yes, he took a step backwards in terms of the raw numbers, but PFF's running back 6 in their grades ultimately forced 56 missed tackles. That was 5th among running backs, despite only being around the 20th in total carries. And in the games so far in his career where he has 20 or more carries, he's gone for over 100 yards in 6 of those 7. They've won 6 of those 7 games as well. So I imagine we're going to get a lot more 20-plus carry games for Kenneth Walker, who did, if anywhere, step up last year, was as a receiving presence too, because he boosted, he nearly doubled his receiving production as well. So yeah, I imagine it's going to be a 1-2 punch. Charbonnet will be involved a little bit, but I think they're going to definitely lean on Walker for more of those 18 to 20 carry days. And he had some monster games when leaned upon that way. So going right around, I'm seeing him fall to the end of round 5 right now. You could load up on 3 receivers, get an elite tight end or one of those elite QBs, and then get him as your RB1. And I think he's going to finish as a top 12 back with this, again, Ravens inspired, Ryan Grubb, again, new coming in with this offensive line background. I just think it's going to be a much more run-centric attack that really allows Ken Walker to flourish. So I'm really pumped about his price right now, and I'm very happy to have him as my running back 1 with a loaded pass-catching corp around him. I'm all good with that.
I mean, I agree. I think that Ken Walker is one of those guys that I'm targeting for those anchor running back builds where I'm grabbing receiver early and then grabbing maybe 1 running back in those middle rounds. And it feels weird to say this, but the explosiveness of Ken Walker, his explosive run rate versus his general success rate, it paints him to be like the Mike Williams of running backs when it comes to best ball. So that's something I'm interested in, and I agree. I think the scheme changes will benefit to Kenneth Walker. I can't say to what degree, just because it's hard to say that they're going to make this dramatic shift with weapons in the building like Metcalf, Lockett, and investing a first-round pick in JSN last year. So it's like with Mike McDonald in the building, I agree that it's seeming like some schematic changes are coming, but it's difficult for me to say to what degree. So I don't love Walker, but I think his current price is fair. So I'm not against drafting Walker. And like I said earlier, I think the best way to slot him into your rosters right now is when you're going with that anchor running back build where you're only taking one running back in those early to mid rounds.
Yeah, and that build is very possible because I think we have two backs we're going to highlight that go in my favorite range right now to invest in the position. And just in general, I think this round 7 to round 9 range, you can get really high-end running back twos that any given week can be a top 5 guy in this like pick 75 to pick 100 range. I love this range in general. Really, none of the names stand out to me as bad picks, but there are a couple that I do like more than others. You picked one that I truly do love at his price tag. That's Raheem Mostert right now going as the running back 28, going at pick 94 in early best ball. I'm a huge fan of that price tag. Why do you like him?
Yeah, like you said, just one of those guys who can have a top end week any given week. Like once again, and which is going to be the case for me with a lot of these running backs, I'm not very sold on the talent, more the role. Raheem Mostert, he's going to be 31 or 32 next season. He's past that age 30 threshold, I know for sure. So it's not exactly appealing. It's honestly kind of scary investing in a running back at that age, but I don't know. We saw him lead the league in touchdowns with 21 rushing touchdowns last year, coming off an RB2 finish. And I think he's got 15 plus touchdown upside this year, with 10 touchdowns being very realistic. I think he's going to have a role in this offense in some capacity between the 20s. I think Achan's going to take on more of those snaps, as assuming he can stay healthy. And that's another rabbit hole to dive down with a 188-pound running back as your 1A. But getting back to Mostert here, I think he'll still be splitting carries with Achan. And then when you get to the goal line, I mean, Achan's, like I just said, 188 pounds. He doesn't really pose much of a threat. Obviously, Mike McDaniel is going to have some packages where Achan will be a part of their goal line sets, but Raheem Mostert profiles to be the most likely goal line back on the roster right now. We saw him in that role last year, result with 20 plus touchdowns. And I know the age is scary, but with this dynamic offense, I think 10 touchdowns is incredibly reasonable to project. And with a little luck on our side, some variance, I think 15 plus is very reasonable. And given that price and the mid 8th round as the RB 28 overall, coming off of a top 5 running back season, I just don't know how you can't invest with him staying in this offense.
I fully agree. I mean, the running back 3 in fantasy last year is going as the running back 28. And what's changed about his situation other than we all anticipate Devon Achan getting a roll bump? And I love Achan. I agree that he likely will be more involved, but you said it, 180 pounds. Can he be a centerpiece? He lasted through 11 games, but 2 of those games, he barely played 2 snaps. There's a real chance that he doesn't make it. And sure, I agree, Mostert, 30-ish, 31 years old, but he has far less tread on his tires than your typical 30-plus-year-old running back. He just had his biggest workload to date last year, and that's the first time he made it through every single game of the season. So I'm not overly concerned with the age here. I look at Mostert in terms of actual carries, probably closer to like a running back, a 28-year-old running back. So that type of discrepancy, running back 3 in production last year, running back 28, and very little, if anything, has changed about his situation other than we assume that Achan's going to get a better role. I'm all about that. There should not be an 80-plus pick gap between those two backs at minimum. I love Mostert. I would have probably picked him had you not. But another back just going right ahead of Mostert that I do really love is James Conner, the running back 22, going at 82 overall in ADP, that round 7 to 8 range. Running back 22, this is his points per game finish the last 3 years since joining the Cardinals. Running back 9, running back 9, running back 11 in fantasy points per game. He's averaged 1.2 touchdowns, 0.62 touchdowns, and 0.7 touchdowns per game. All three of those numbers were towards the top 3 in backs over that. And I get it, touchdowns are unsustainable. Don't chase those. But when you do it 3 years in a row as a top 3 in touchdowns per game type of guy, there's something there with Connor. He is a bull. They love going to him when they get to the stripe. And why wouldn't you? He always seems to pound it in. And once Murray was back, it took Connor a while. He was borderline useless, similar to kind of Dak Prescott for the first half of the year. And then Murray came back. There was still a couple of weeks of growing pains. But after those 2 weeks where Murray is getting his feet under him, Connor was getting used to this offense, kind of operating with his main guy back. This is how he finished the season. The running back 5, running back 10, running back 4, running back 4, running back 1 over the final 5 games. 22, 19, 22, 26, and 30 points over those games. Was the running back 1 from week 13 on, above Christian McCaffrey, averaged 21.3 fantasy points per game. So there's a ceiling clearly here, a consistent ceiling to do that 5 weeks in a row. And that's available again in the round 7 to 8 range with nothing different from last year. That's part of why I love this. They didn't go and sign anybody else to compete with him or to back him up that could siphon work. In fact, Gannon has talked all offseason about how we love James Conner. He's our centerpiece. He's our lead focal back. And we have no problem making him the bell cow because he just rises to the occasion and he opens up so much for our offense. Multiple times this offseason already saying that. So I don't see any reason why James Conner's role is going to be different from, again, running back 9, 9, and 11 the last 3 years since joining the Cardinals. But you're getting that running back 22 all day. I love, again, this 0 RB builds that lead to you getting James Conner, then Mostert and Najee Harris, whoever in this range of 7 to 8. But Conner and Mostert are two of my favorites in this. What do you think of Conner? I know it's unsexy. Montgomery also goes like right ahead of this range. I know we're Montgomery guys. I was shocked to not see him on your list here, Mo. But I love this range. Do you think Conner's worthy of our shout out here?
I wrote about this last offseason. I think Connor is one of those guys who just consistently overlooked for no reason. He never has the flashy production, but he's one of those kings of consistency. You know what you're going to get out of him. It's going to be some RB1 weeks with a lot of RB2 weeks mixed in there. But as long as he's on the field, he's been productive throughout his career. And I mean, that's really just what it comes down to. He hasn't played a full season in his career yet. So you're kind of locked up to miss 3 to 4 games there. But as long as you get 14 games out of Connor, I think you're going to be fine at this price. I don't think he projects to be a guy that smashes and pays off massively for your team. I think his ceiling is right around that RB like 1 to 2 threshold, like between 12 and 13. But with his price as a low end RB2, and like you said, if you're building your roster in a way where you're waiting on a running back, I think he's one of those really good, like we talked about the importance of floor and best ball. He's one of those really good floor guys who's going to give you consistent production. And given his current price, yeah, I agree. He's not a huge needle mover, but you need those guys on your roster who are going to give consistent production.
Absolutely. And that's just, again, a kind of reminder here, and you'll see it in my receiver picks in a second, that, I get best ball. Everyone thinks those huge spike weeks are what you really need. And sure, you do need some of those guys in your roster that can hit those 30-point thresholds to keep elevating you up. But it is very important to have those consistent 10-plus point guys that can just get into your wide receiver 3 spot, that can get into your flex spot, and make sure you're not ever just taking L's in those positions. And Connor balances that out. And we'll talk about a few receivers, I think, do the same in just a second. But Wolfpack, please, again, if you enjoy what you're hearing, the likes, the retweets, the shares, everything is so useful and helpful to us. So if you enjoy the content, thank you so much for being here. We'd love and appreciate any help you can give us to grow the Wolfpack. And any questions and comments you guys have, we see about 4 of them, 5 of them coming in on YouTube already. Awesome. We'd love some more. When we hit the draft, we love to just kind of get back and interacting with you guys. We'll mow through the rest of these values here, though, before we draft. And we'll go to wide receiver, starting at the top with a Mo staple these last couple of years, Deontay Johnson. I don't know that I'm fully on board with this one, so I'd like to hear your case, because I don't like Bryce Young, at least what I saw last year, and it's pretty hard too. But there are a lot of cases that he just was dealt such a terrible hand with what they surrounded him with. So we shall see. I'd love to hear your take, because I have loved Deontay the player. This seemed like one of the only spots he could have landed that is potentially worse than where he was. So let's hear your case for Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, just one of those guys that I've always supported throughout his career, just because of his skill. Like, it's not just a guy that I randomly like. I genuinely believe he is one of the high caliber receivers in the NFL, and the data supports that. And now that his price is getting knocked down for yet another offseason, if it had stayed around the same price as it was last year, I may not have been as interested. But 2 off seasons in a row, Deontay Johnson's price is getting knocked down, so it's hard for me to not come crawling back to him. Currently going as the wide receiver 43 in the middle of the 7th round in drafts. I don't want to be taking interest in the Panthers offense, but I will when it comes to Johnson. Bryce Young, this narrative has been discussed at length everywhere, essentially. A lot of the issues with Bryce Young are being pinned on his receivers last year. They created the least separation of any receiving core in the NFL last year. So a rookie quarterback combined with receivers who are constantly covered is just not a recipe to have your rookie succeed. I know that's a mind-blowing take, but it is what it is. And you know what Deontay Johnson is? He's one of the best route runners in the NFL who has continued to prove that he can get open. You can look at his reception perception profile from very respected analyst Matt Harmon, who's great at analyzing receivers and giving his opinion. And his ESPN Open Score, just a composite advanced stat that looks at receivers' abilities to get open. It's pretty self-explanatory, and he is consistently one of the highest ranking players in ESPN Open Score and has some of the best scores of all time in terms of that metric. So we know he can get open. And just with his given ability currently, and then the lack of competition that I think he's going to be facing in Carolina, I see the route to 130 plus targets for Deontay Johnson. We saw Adam Thielen start to go down that path last year. Very early on, Thielen was getting peppered with targets and getting 10 plus targets a game in those first 6 weeks of the season. But in the most predictive outcome ever, most obvious outcome ever, Adam Thielen runs out of steam and doesn't get it done down the stretch last year. I don't think anyone else saw that coming other than me. I think that was a really hot take last year. But I think Deontay Johnson has a much, much better chance than Adam Thielen to have sustained success throughout the season. And like I said, it was just a short stretch, but Bryce Young has proven capable of sustaining a top fantasy receiver. He did it with that handful of week stretch for Adam Thielen. I'm not sure how long it lasted before the fall off. I want to say about 6 weeks between Bryce Young and Adam Thielen, where he was playing as a top 10 receiver in terms of fantasy production. So he's shown that he can do it. And with the lack of competition and Deontay Johnson's ability to get open, I think the path for him getting peppered with targets and producing is pretty likely.
Yeah, I get all those points for sure. And Scott Barrett had a great tweet about how Deontay Johnson's open score for 5 straight years has been better than Justin Jefferson. I'm obviously not saying that Deontay's a better receiver, but in terms of just pure separation and doing those easy layup type routes, that role could potentially be there for him. Thielen, yeah, he did have the 15th most targets, the 9th most receptions, even after it was a scorching start. But even on the season, that's what he ended with when he just petered out. He still had some pretty solid just counting totals there as well. And through the first 6 weeks, he was a top 5 receiver. So yeah, maybe if he does sustain that, there is some upside here. I'll believe in Bryce Young when I see it, but I get all your points in terms of open score, ability, the need for somebody like that here. Yeah, that all makes sense. It all checks. And I think Deontay checks that box. So we shall see. I also just kind of like the running backs in that range. And my typical builds, I'm not looking at a receiver in that round 7 range. So I haven't clicked his name too often, but you bring up some fair points, no doubt about it. The first receiver I'll highlight, I typically go early receivers, 3, 4 in the first 5 picks. And I don't typically go to the position until that 100 range. And a guy I keep landing on, my second highest owned receiver right now, is Courtland Sutton, wide receiver 4,700 overall ADP. And this is with wide receivers, again, at a premium on these best ball underdog drafts. No price change since Jerry Jeudy has been traded. This guy finished 6th in touchdowns last year, playing that kind of big body, move around Mike Thomas role they hyped up in the preseason. He filled that to near perfection this last year. Certainly didn't have the consistency in terms of daily receptions each week, but overall was a great touchdown scorer there. 10 plus in 11 of 16 games. That just means like you got your locked in wide receiver 3 each and every week. And again, in best ball, yes, you need some ceilings, but you also just need some guys that beat their ADP, that outperform it. And given that Courtland Sutton these last 3 years has not finished worse than the wide receiver 35, but he's going 12 picks later. Now, probably the best setup. We don't know who his QB is, and there's certainly some question marks, and we know that the ceiling is pretty capped here, but 9 to 10 touchdowns at a 100 overall ADP with that type of steady, consistent play. And again, I filtered that up for half PPR, where he had, again, 10 plus in 11 of 16 games. That has a place in best ball. That means you're going to consistently have a wide receiver 3 that's usable. I like it. I love the price tag here. And maybe, just maybe, we've seen Courtland Sutton finish as a top 15 wide receiver long time ago. I get that. I don't think that ceiling's there anymore, but I just like it. It's kind of that trend again of unsexy upside that, yeah, I can't string a ceiling narrative, but I can certainly give you the floor narrative and why at his price tag, he's going to be a very useful best ball player. And I certainly think that for Courtland Sutton. It's ugly, but what do you think, Mo?
I'm sorry. This is one I just can't get behind right now. Like there's just too much going on here for me to get behind it. The price I get, I mean, what low end wide receiver 4 with, and he's a guy who definitely has that upside. I can understand why you'd want to invest, but with the quarterback questions currently, and I'm just looking at his numbers from last year now. His best finish in a game without a touchdown was wide receiver 29, and you've got a lot of in those games without touchdowns, you got wide receiver 81, wide receiver 47, wide receiver 122. So I think a lot of those touchdowns, I don't want to completely attribute it to Russ, but Russ's play style, I just wrote about Russ's move to Pittsburgh, and I mentioned in that article the Russ Moonball, and I think that Russ's, I don't want to say reckless, but more aggressive play style helped out Courtland Sutton last year. We saw a lot of those bomb touchdowns that saved his fantasy week, and those are hard for me to rely on going into next year. And that was a reason I didn't like Devontae Adams last year. It's just hard for me to get behind those guys who produce almost exclusively on huge touchdowns. So it's going to be hard for me to be convinced of Courtland Sutton being a good value, but I can understand it. But at the moment, I'm not getting behind it.
Hey, fair enough. But Russell Wilson, who threw 26 touchdowns, I don't think he is the skeleton key to this guy's success. Yeah. I think he's a big body, good red zone threat. Sean Payton loved to use him in that way. I think whoever's the quarterback, even if it's down to Stidham, can still get him the rock. And talking about touchdown score in his games without touchdowns feels a little unfair here.
Yeah.
So be it. My other value, and then we'll hit your. I like your other take a lot. And again, I'm looking in this kind of 100 range because I love the early wide receivers, and I can't really count a first 3-round receiver as a value. It's the first 3 rounds. And then I do tend to turn to running backs in those middle rounds. So I don't have a pick 60 to 70. I like Zay Flowers in that range. And some guys I really do tend to like and gravitate towards in round 5 and 6. But ultimately, there's no one I'm like just consistently clicking on. But I do find myself after Courtland Sutton the next round, I often do land on Tyler Lockett. Again, unsexy. No one's going to be like, oh, this guy recommended Tyler Lockett. I better go sell the farm. But this guy's going as wide receiver 54 right now, 116 ADP. And since 2018, he's finished as the wide receiver 16, 14, 9, 14, 13. And then last year, wide receiver 33. I get it. That's probably going to resemble more what this next year is. And maybe the highest of the rest of his career. He's getting up there in age. JSN's now here, more established and probably more involved next year. But we got 123 targets for Tyler Lockett last year. That was more than DK Metcalf, who goes 80 picks earlier. So it's not like he's just suddenly disappeared, Tyler Lockett, because JSN ran. And what is this new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who I've talked about? I think I'm a big fan of him. I love what he did at Washington. I know that I talked about Ken Walker and this being more of a run-centric attack, and I think it is, and it is going to decrease the overall size of the pie here. But my imagination is they're going to definitely set up that play action, set up the deep ball, and that's where Tyler Lockett's lethal. And we know that Geno Smith has loved him since arriving there. So I really do like Tyler Lockett. Again, not sexy, but when you're just looking for ADP beaters in that range, he's going to be better than the wide receiver 54 where he's going. And it is Tyler Lockett, whose game does kind of lend itself to this best ball style format where he had multiple 20-point weeks last year as well. So I like Tyler Lockett. Again, not overly sexy or anything of that nature. I get it, but we're looking at values. We're looking at guys that are going to beat their ADP and be useful for you in best ball. And I think the common trend here for me is that unsexy. No one really wants to click them because they're not going to get a league winner by this guy, but a league winner could just be that guy that's consistently jumping into your lineup for some steady production. So I like Lockett at his price.
I agree. I think you put it pretty well. He's a guy who's just going to beat his ADP. And in fantasy football, I think it's almost like a law, if you want to call it at this point. Tyler Lockett beating his ADP, it's almost
Every year.
guaranteed. And every year people undervalue him because they like DK Metcalf. They say Lockett's getting too old, whatever reason you want to give. But I've just learned to Tyler Lockett is a known ADP beater. He's going to outperform it almost every year. It will stop at some point, but wide receiver 54 has to be the lowest price of his career. So I'm going to continue to buy. I agree.
Awesome. And your last guy here, Christian Kirk, who took a little bit of a step back last year with Calvin Ridley arriving, but Calvin Ridley's no longer there. And I'm intrigued to see what they can do in a follow-up here. Trevor Lawrence's third year with Doug Peterson. You like Christian Kirk as a big wide receiver value. What's your take?
Yeah, I do. Like you said, Calvin Ridley out of the picture, so a big chunk of that target pie no longer in Jacksonville, and he's got a locked-in role in this offense. He's their slot guy. He's not going to have anyone to compete with for that role. They brought in Gabe Davis on the outside, who's never really been an elite target earner. Christian Kirk's not necessarily elite at that either, but he consistently runs, like we've harped on this entire offseason. He's the one in that offense, along with Evan Ingram, who's running those layup targets, who are just easy little dink and dunk passes from Trevor Lawrence. And speaking of Trevor Lawrence, I really think Doug Peterson and the front office in Jacksonville understand that they have to get him going. We're into the phase of his career whether he will be labeled a true bust or the true franchise guy in Jacksonville. And they expect more out of the passing game in Jacksonville, and I think that Christian Kirk is going to be a big part of it. With those, I think you'll see plenty of targets out of the slot with those easy routes like we've been talking about. And the competition, it's not great. I mean, Zay Jones, Evan Ingram's solid. I like Evan Ingram. I'm not sold on Zay Jones. I don't think he's too stiff of a competition, and I don't think we've seen the entirety of this. I don't think we've seen a full, complete wide receiver core in Jacksonville. They've got Parker Washington, who filled in for Kirk at the end of the year last year, but he's another guy who's not really moving the needle for me. He's got a locked up role in an offense, a passing offense that I think can be better, will be better, and should be better in 2024. So buying, like I always say, investing in solid offenses that are going to be passing the ball, it's always something that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I've talked about too. I just think that division's ripe for shootouts. Pretty poor defenses, improving offenses all around. I think that defense is going to have that division in general is just going to have a lot of shootout games. And you look, I think Christian Kirk's role resembles just 2 years ago so much better than what it does last year. So you can't just automatically swap it in. But you look at what he did 2 years ago. His first year in Jacksonville, wide receiver 15 in targets, 14 in reception, 12 in fantasy points. I don't see any reason that he can't get close to those numbers again. And at his price tag, that's not even close. They're definitely factoring in last year far more than what we saw 2 years ago. And I could see him being much more valuable this last season. We'll wrap up here with just one tight end each, and then it's on to the draft, on to all your questions. So let's talk about some of our favorite tight ends. I'm going on a little different approach at tight end for where I'm looking at value. So why don't you start us off with who you're going for? And then I've got a couple guys that are in the same range that I'll talk about.
Yeah, so I tend to lean towards going for the late tight end in these drafts. The tight end prices are more depressed this year than they were last year. I mean, obviously we had Travis Kelce going in the middle of the first round last year, and some guys coming up in the second, Mark Andrews and the like, and it's coming up into the early to middle rounds. But I'm interested in Jake Ferguson this year. He's the tight end 11th off the board. He's the tight end 11 off the board, going in the late 8th round in drafts right now. And of the guys who are a step down from the elite tier of tight ends, those Kittles, Kelce's, what have you, McBrides, and Laporta now, I think he's by far the most obvious answer for those mid to late round tight ends. Last season, he was a top 12 tight end, and once he became a full-time starter, he was a big part of this Dallas offense. And when I'm targeting one of those late tight ends, I'm really looking for consistent targets and usage in the red zone, because the tight end position, it's just such a steep drop off after you get out of leave those handful of elite tight ends. So just consistent usage is just such a big advantage and benefit, because you have those guys like Kate Otten, they're out there running all the routes, but 1 week they've got 13 targets and the next week they've got 2. Consistent production is incredibly valuable at the tight end position. And after becoming a full-time starter last year, Jake Ferguson had 10 of 12 games with at least 5+ targets. He cracked double-digit targets twice. He was second in end zone targets among tight ends and first in red zone targets. So he's being used in the offense overall, and they're targeting him with those high-value opportunities in the red zone and the end zone. So with chances to score and being utilized throughout the field, throughout the length of the field and within the offensive scheme, Jake Ferguson is a pretty easy guy to click for me, especially when that first group of elite tight ends has passed.
Yeah, I love the call a lot. And you look at the way he ended the year, that playoff game, he had like 40 PPR points in that game. So maybe the ceiling is just starting to get scratched too, based on that performance as well. And even if not, all the points you made lay a nice foundation for Ferguson just to continue to do what he did. Good value at the price we're getting with potential room to grow. I actually find the best values at tight end, which is weird to say at this price range. I think they're going in round 4 to maybe 6, but rounds 4 and 5, especially, I think we can get some great value. We're talking about the top 3 tight ends. So I get that doesn't seem like a value, but Travis Kelce, as you mentioned, was a mid-first round pick just last year and for multiple seasons in a row. And I get that he dropped off last year, but he was still the tight end 3 with a drop off. So if we get drop off Travis Kelce at the 4th round price, that's good. That's good returning value at 220 points last year in the tight end 3 finish. That would be solid where he's going right now at around 42 to 45 range. Again, round 4. I'll take that all day. And then you get the chance that, hey, maybe that Travis Kelce we saw in the playoffs, which it took all year to get to. I'm not saying we can just bank on that coming back by any means. In fact, I doubt that we will. But those playoff games, 24.5 points, 29.1 points, 18.3 points to close out the final 3 games of the year. There is a chance that we just get Travis Kelce of old for a full season. And part of why I think he blew up, and certainly what Andy Reid said in his press conference to end the year, was that Rashee Rice emerging really took a lot of pressure off Travis Kelce, and that helped him just regain what he was doing. He did talk about a little bit of a snap count, trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs, and that will always be a risk. I get that, but I also do buy into this narrative that, yeah, Travis Kelce is better when he had the Tyreek on the field, when he has now Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown now coming there. I think all those things are actually good for Travis Kelce because the defense can't just focus on taking him out of the game, and rather they have to account for all these other weapons. So I love Travis Kelce in this round 4 price, but I also do love Trey McBride in that same range. Should I miss on Travis Kelce, I'm almost always picking a tight end in round 4, though, at this point, whether it's Kelce, McBride, who in his 10 games without Ertz last year, he averaged 8.5 targets, 6.6 receptions, 65 yards per game, and 15 fantasy points per game, while only on pace for 5 touchdowns. So this is a big guy that could potentially see a doubling in his touchdowns right now. But that full season pace with those averages, 112 catches, 1,114 yards, 144 targets, and you look at their wide receiver depth chart, I don't see any reason why that's unsustainable. Yes, they're going to add a Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors. Somebody's going to be picked at pick 4 to be that number 1 receiver. But Trey McBride can definitely be another 1A, 1B. We saw it last year. He absolutely can shoulder a huge passing game chunk here, and I expect him to. He showed great chemistry with Kyler Murray to close out the season. So whether it's Travis Kelce banking on a rebound or even just him hitting the numbers he got last year at his price, and again, I'm banking on a bounce back, or you go Trey McBride, I love this range because then you're looking at tight ends that can get you those 20-plus point weeks. And I talked about this as we closed out our draft last week. I don't mind going like a tight end round 4 and round 6, round 4 and 5, getting Andrews in that range, even like getting a couple tight ends that can just consistently give you that option to have 18 to 20 every week. If one of them just goes off, but then if both go off, then you got your flex all taken care of too. I think the tight ends are getting severely overlooked. I think I talked about how in DraftKings, I often would go double tight ends because of how undervalued they were with the Laporte. It's not a strategy I ever employed. It's just a new thing that's starting to come up here with these younger tight ends really, really starting to boom. So I love the tight ends in that round 4 to 5 range. I think the Ferguson shout out's a great one. I think David Njoku in that range, because I was doing the Trey McBride research to see how did he do over that second half of the year. And in those final 10 games, he was the tight end 2. Somehow Njoku was the tight end 1, and nobody even talks about that or looks at it. And it kind of stuns me. I guess I'm a little worried about Watson because a lot of those games came without him, but still, tight end 1 over that span is still impressive to note. And he's going, right in that Ferguson tight end 9 or so range as well. So there's a lot of good tight ends, and I don't mind, even if I invest early in that round 4, I don't mind taking another one in those next 4 to 5 rounds, including Ferguson, including Ingram, because I really think that the tight end position, getting that weekly edge, gives you such a humongous step up against the guy that's drafting 3 tight ends in the last round and none of them are hitting. You can really gain some huge points here. But I love Kelsey and McBride in those round 4 to 5 tight ends. I think it's an absolute steal.
I think it's been interesting to see the elite tight end prices falling this year. But I think a lot of it has to do with just the lackluster season from Kelsey and the injury to Mark Andrews. So those elite tight ends that people were paying those premium prices for didn't really pay off last season. So I think that's the reason we're seeing the elite guys fall into the 3rd, 4th round. But if I'm targeting any of those guys in the 4th round, and I agree, I think those prices are good. I like McBride a lot. Like you mentioned, just little competition for targets. And he, during that stretch last year, after he took over for Zach Ertz, he was a great target earner. His target share was floating around 30% at points during that stretch. Mm-hmm. And he was performing as not a top tight end. He was performing as a legit wide receiver 2 in fantasy. So the guys at ETR, they joke and call him Trey Gronkowski, and I completely get behind it. I love the guy. He's got the profile and the skills to be one of those ultimate mismatch guys who can be the focal point of the passing attack at the tight end position. So he's definitely one of those guys that I'm looking to snatch up, especially at that round 4 price.
I know, indeed. Well, yeah, so that kind of wraps up our discussion on overall values, guys. Thank you again so much for listening to us there. I am going to pull in. I hope we don't have too much to wait for now with this draft, because I forgot to, usually while we're talking, I end up ultimately entering the draft, and then we're ready to go. So we can already talk about a few more values, a few guys we hadn't highlighted while we wait for this draft to load. They go pretty quick, though. So I'm going to pull it up now. But as we're doing that, Wolfpack, all of our content is at rotostreetjournal.com. You can find me at rotostreetwolf as well, and a thumbs up button to help us continue to grow would be so greatly appreciated. It looks like we have about 6 spots to fill here in this draft. So let me pull that on in, and we'll just talk about any other values that we didn't really get a chance to highlight. One being for me, I'm going to pull up the wide receiver banner. One thing I did want to talk about with this draft specifically, Best Ball Mania is going to throw this all out the window once we have the rookies in their new homes and their landing spots. But I love drafting rookies at this stage, and especially the rookies that are going after pick 120 at the wide receiver position. This is known as a historic class, with some of these guys that are projected to go round 1 also still falling to pick 160 because they're projected to be the 7th wide receiver off the board, but there could be 8 to 10 potential wide receivers off the board in round 1. That's how crazy this class is. And that's actually seems to me like a benefit. If you're going in those later draft slots, that means you're probably going to you're definitely going to a better overall team, and all likelihood a better overall quarterback, better situation. So some guys I wanted to toss out in particular are Ladd McConkey. I think he is a great right now, because if you draft Ladd McConkey, if you're the team that goes after him, that means you have that exact layup type of role in mind. He is such a ridiculous route runner and separator. His feet are as fast and quick as I've ever seen. So if you're drafting him, you're drafting him with that kind of quick hit game in mind, but he can also separate. 4.38 speed was a top 10 percentile for Ladd McConkey as well with his pro day. So I think in terms of the mold that you're getting the high percentage throws, in addition to some deep shots as well, I'm excited to see where he lands. I think he could be an absolute difference maker. But then you got like Xavier Legette going at pick 160 or so. Huge body that was in the top 30 RAS scores of the last 20 years, according to the math bomb Keith Platt that does all the RAS scores. So I mean, he could be interesting. A lot of smart draft guys, especially Dane Brugler. We talked about this last week. Ricky Purcell, he's going 166. Again, until we know where they land, it's tough to project them, but a lot of those guys are looking like they're going to fall to those quality teams. One of them could land with the Bills, one could land with the Chiefs, and then bam, they're going to be going 30 more plus rounds earlier. So I think there's a lot of value to be mined in the later bits of this historic wide receiver class. Even Jalen McMillan going at the end of rounds. I think one thing we didn't distinguish too, I know I'm starting to ramble just a little bit, but we didn't distinguish values. I didn't want to go with some of my highest owned guys that I'm going in the last round, the Zekes, the DeMarcus Robinsons. Those are like the last round stabs that we'll talk about in a separate show for sure. We're kind of talking about those like 1 through 100 round type guys, or ADP rather. So I love the rookie receivers as one last shout out. And it looks like we only need 2 more people for this draft to start. Any other just last values you want to shout out or build on the rookie receivers at all?
Yeah, we talked about the rookie receivers at length over the last couple of weeks, so I'll hit a little bit of a different direction. I've got two little quick hitters here. One is Drake May. He's still falling pretty far down draft boards, and he's getting drafted behind guys like Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers. Davis Maddock was the one on Twitter who pointed this out. How is he going behind Justin Fields in drafts? That just doesn't make any sense at all. He's going to be a top 3 pick unless something absolutely wild happens. And he's going to be starting consistently for a team. I don't get the price, especially relative to the other quarterbacks. And the other one I wanted to quickly talk about was Davante Adams, falling now to the back of the second round as the wide receiver 11. I talked about him about not liking him last year, but that was when he was up going at the 1-2 turn. Now he's falling back almost a full round, and he's got a new quarterback in town. He's got, as of now, the starting quarterback will be Gardner Minshew, and we saw him pepper Michael Pittman with targets last year. I don't know how many Pittman finished with, but it was at least 140, probably over 150. And Davante Adams has proven to be, in still last year, even though it wasn't his best season, one of the best target earners in the NFL. His targets per route run metrics, his first read metrics, everything in terms of earning targets was elite. So I think he's going to continue to have another elite season in terms of those peripheral metrics. And I think Gardner Minshew is a veteran quarterback who understands that you get the ball to your best guy on the field who has the best chance to make plays. And so I'm in at that wide receiver 11 price as we come up on the clock here in just a few picks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all those shout outs were great. I especially like Drake May. Again, I'll pull up the draft here and get to our pick, but there's a lot of rumblings. The Drake May's college quarterback coach is now the Vikings quarterback coach. And so there's a lot of dot connecting that he might go to the Vikings. If he's the guy that's throwing to Justin Jefferson, and now we have our pick. I mean, Tyreek Hill we got Tyreek Hill at 5, right? There's no real.
Yeah, I wanted to interrupt you to say, what are we seeing here? But 3 running backs in the first 3 picks, and Tyreek Hill falls into our lap at 5. I'm more than okay with that.
And the third one being Christian McCaffrey. If 3 running backs go in the first 3 picks, that's kind of shocking. And then the third one being Christian McCaffrey. Like, what the hell is happening to start this draft? We see Breece Hall, Bijan, and CMC go as the first 3 picks. Wild stuff. You're absolutely right.
I'm interested to see how the draft shakes out for the 2 guys in the 1 and 2 slot. Passing on McCaffrey and CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill is interesting to me, but
absolutely. And if there's any running backs that you could make the case above CMC, it is Breece and Bijan, younger. Ideally, with Rodgers coming to the Jets and they signed Tyron Smith, so the line is better for Breece, and he finished as the number 3 running back anyways last year. There's definitely the obvious case there. And then you got Kirk Cousins coming in for Bijan and Zach Robinson, maybe giving him the Kyron Williams treatment. Like they could definitely beat out CMC, but you are banking on CMC also just not being the best player in fantasy that he's been for every year that he's made it through in his career. He's been that guy. So if you had to go running back early, which is already kind of a disadvantage in best ball, I don't know how you pass up on CMC, who's just consistently done it. But hey, I guess it's a different build. It gives you a different type of exposure there at the top of round 1. So you're going to have something unique there with Breece Hall and whoever you're getting at the turn. I'm excited to see what those 2 guys do, though. If there's going to be a trend throughout the draft that they're just going kind of wild here, or if they start to follow the trend after an early round anchor being a little bit different in their minds. But I love getting Tyreek at 5 here. I think that's insane. But yeah, and all the guys you shouted out too, again, I love the Drake May call, again, especially if he lands in Minnesota. That's going to be a steal. And then Davante Adams, I hope we get him here in round 2. I'm a huge fan. I've gotten a ton of Davante Adams in the second round, given that Minshew, you talked about locking on Michael Pittman, was a magnet for targets. So I think it is great. And maybe they even upgrade the quarterback further in the draft, and it's only better for Davante Adams. So, unless Garrett Wilson fell to us, I think we'd go him. But otherwise, I'd like to get Davante Adams, who has now leaped over DJ Moore, understandably so, with Keenan Allen going there. I'm hoping it's one of these 2, Davante Adams or Garrett Wilson. Is there anybody else, though, that you'd like to see queued up on this list?
No, I'm going Davante Adams over Marvin Harrison for sure.
Over Drake London for sure, who just went at 16. Oh, my God. That hype is just too insane.
Yeah, it's getting out of hand. I think I'm not going to make a full concrete take yet on Drake London, but as of now, I am out on him at this price. But to kind of backtrack and change the topic almost completely, I'll wait until we make this pick, and then I want to get your opinion on Breece Hall. But we're about to be on the clock in a few picks, and I think our best targets can be Devontae Adams here.
There he goes, which is unfortunate. Anybody, I don't know. I don't really like any of these guys. I'm not gonna lie. I don't mind Ayuk. Who do you like here?
Marvin Harrison over DJ Moore for me. I think we go Marvin Harrison here.
Yeah, there's a very, very good chance he ends up as Kyler Murray's number one. We've seen DeAndre Hopkins just be an absolute animal in that role, and Harrison is DeAndre Hopkins plus 2 inches faster, stronger. I don't have much Marvin Harrison, so I'm typically out at his price, but here, and the reason I'm out at his price is because I'm usually going Devontae Adams over him. So with Adams gone and the rest of the receiver options underwhelming, I don't mind going that at all. And Josh Allen was the only other one I was going to toss out, and he went the pick before us. You mentioned you had a question on Breece Hall, though, you wanted to ask.
Yeah, so I haven't done my own personal full-blown deep dive into Breece Hall yet, but I obviously looked over his numbers from last year, and just anecdotally thinking back to the games, a lot of people are hyping up Breece Hall as this top 2 running back because of his involvement in the receiving game, but just looking back at the Jets games last year, I feel like a lot of that was a function of the Jets offense just being a complete mess. He was getting a lot of these dump down targets because there was a lot of early pressure for whoever they were starting at quarterback that given week, and just lack of talent in the wide receiver room outside of Garrett Wilson. And I feel like just a lot of targets ended up occurring just because the general offense is a mess, and people are banking on his receiving usage, but I just don't see it being the same. And we'll make our pick here real quick before we keep talking about that. I like
either Evans or Dell. I'm into one of those two. What do you think?
I like Evans here, just because I know I think it's a toss-up between the two, but we've gotten Dell a couple of times in the drafts that we've done together, so I don't mind going Evans here. But what do you think about that? The expectation that Breece Hall is going to be heavily involved in the receiving game. I know he's dynamic, but just in terms of the target share and the raw targets, I just feel like we can't really bank on the work that he was seeing last year.
I don't know that we'll get the same exact level of volume. I can agree with you there. The thing is, though, is it all comes down to Rodgers. And if Rodgers stays healthy, he has given Aaron Jones healthy target shares throughout his career. And you see it with these elite quarterbacks throughout their careers, whether it's Brady, whether it's Peyton Manning. They're just so good at not overthinking it, taking what's there for them. And there's a reason why so many of Manning's and Brady's and these elite quarterbacks have had running backs that end up being top 3 in total receptions for the season. And I think Breece Hall would still, even if he didn't finish first among running backs and targets like he did last year, I think the favorable looks that Aaron Rodgers would provide, the way he can check in and out of things and situations, you give that type of receiving volume, plus the idea that this offense would just be so much more efficient overall. So the touchdown opportunities, the line improving and opening up more space for him. I do really like Breece Hall. I don't have a lot of him right now because I've typically gone either Bijan or Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of him. But I'm not overly concerned. If I was going to poke holes in Breece Hall, it's not because they're going to suddenly throw to him so much more less that he's going to take a huge step back. It's more so that I don't believe in Rodgers being able to stay healthy off an Achilles injury at his age, and I just don't expect the Jets to suddenly become this elite offense. But I do also like that they steadied out the offense with Tyrod Taylor as the backup and not Zach Wilson now. Not that Tyrod's this insane, amazing option, but it's definitely better than Zach Wilson as a life vest here. So I think I'm not too worried about Breece Hall. I don't think he'll see as many targets as he did last year, but I think the looks that he's going to be targeted in are going to be much more favorable. And he can run that full route tree as well that we've seen Rodgers throw the wheel to Aaron Jones deep down the field. How many times have we seen Aaron Jones have 50-yard catches? I am not overly concerned about Breece Hall's receiving usage. In fact, even if the numbers go back, I bet you he receives for more yards than he did because the looks are going to be that much better. So I like Breece Hall, and I think the receiving usage is not a big red flag for me right now.
Yep, I obviously get the hype behind Breece Hall. I mean, he's one of the most dynamic running backs in the league, and I agree that Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to put the Jets offense in general, including Breece Hall, in a lot better chances to succeed and produce. I guess it's just my nature to poke holes, especially in those early
As
round
you
running
should.
backs.
Yeah.
But
And if he's going above Christian McCaffrey, yeah, we should poke some holes.
yeah,
I agree.
yeah,
No doubt about it. There's definitely some holes. To me, it's more so about Rodgers and his overall health. If Rodgers stays healthy, I'm in love. All right, we're getting close to our pick here, and we already have 3 receivers, but I would not hate going a 4th receiver. I wouldn't hate going the tight end that I hyped up as the best value in fantasy, Travis Kelce or Trey McBride, which might be a little early. We could potentially hope that McBride falls to us the next round as well. I kind of, if Devonta or Cooper Kupp fall to us, I like going either of them. I don't even hate, like, this is where you could consider going Lamar Jackson as a pretty huge quarterback edge. But I do like, maybe targeting Dak and some of the other values we talked about too. So there goes Devonta. Who's catching your, well, now, and there goes Kupp.
yeah. My pick with Smith and Kupp off the board. My pick here would be Lamar or one of the tight ends, but I don't mind taking a chance and hoping McBride gets back to us. So I would say Lamar here.
Yeah, and even if he doesn't, and this guy has a quarterback already, so I can't imagine. Maybe he goes Lamar. But let's say we don't get either Kelce or McBride on the way back. Well, Andrews is our stacking partner, anyways, right? So
yeah, just go grab Andrews. Yeah,
Andrews will be there most likely. I'd be shocked if all 3 of these tight ends are gone, and if they are, damn, that sucks because this is the range where I do love getting my tight end, but I have no issue getting a Lamar right there. Absolutely. Second year in this offense, right? The second most fantasy points of his career in the first year in the scheme. Zay Flowers could take a step forward. I love this offense.
He's coming off an MVP season, and his price isn't really different at all than it was last season. And
if anything, it's cheaper.
I'm fully behind Lamar at this price. I don't get. Yeah, I mean he can't. I think that my first comment summed it up. He's coming off an MVP season, and there's no reason to like him any less. But he's still staying at the same price or even cheaper.
I mean, some people might be a little concerned, like Derrick Henry getting here and how good he is at capping off at the stripe. But Gus Edwards had 13 touchdowns. I think 12 of them came from within the 1 yard line. So yeah, Henry will probably get those and mop up those as well. I wouldn't argue there. Yet I also think, what if Lamar has 3-4 more of those just go his way? Because he has had plenty of insane success at the goal line and just rushing in general. So there goes Andrews. Damn it. Maybe Kelce will fall to us at this point, but McBride and Andrews are gone. So our hope of a tight end falling to us now rests on Travis Kelce. I don't mind going Rome or Cooper here though, if he doesn't. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I like Kelce here, but I had to get one more little comment in on Lamar. People are worried about Derrick Henry taking away from his goal line work, but what goal line work is he taking away from? I think people confuse Lamar's rushing ability in the open field with him being a battering ram at the goal line. So here's our pick, and I'll continue after we make it. I like Rome here.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Up to you.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, people confuse his dynamic rushing ability in the open field with him being Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. He's not that guy. He only attempted 5 rushes. He only attempted 5 rushes from inside the 5 yard line last year. They're not getting inside the 5 and saying, "Hey, let's get Lamar up the gut or get him on the outside." That's not what they're doing. They did it last year. They handed the ball to Gus Edwards. I don't think Derrick Henry really changes the opportunity for Lamar to score at the goal line. So if that's the rationale behind coming after Lamar and keeping him at the same price as he was last year, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And again, it's not even like he was going mid 3. Andrews was going, early, late second, early third. So yeah, he's going almost a round later, Lamar, than he was last year. And I don't see. Yeah, I agree completely. The Henry will get the Gus Edwards role plus a little bit more, and he'll do probably a little bit more than what Edwards did, but ultimately, I just think the offense is going to be that much tougher to defend and that much all over the place. And I'm with you. I think Lamar, I've gotten a good amount of Lamar he could have been. I went with like Stafford again as my value quarterback, but round 4 Lamar. I love it. And the
I
only
agree.
reason I don't love it is because the Dak one, the case you made for Dak last year, him going multiple rounds later. But I still think Lamar at this price is tough to top.
I agree. I find it hard to like make the value case for the guys who don't rush. But with Lamar, I mean, anyone who follows the NFL knows he's got that rushing side.
Yeah.
So if this price holds throughout the offseason, I'm gonna see probably a frightening share of Lamar Jackson on my best ball teams.
Frightening. I like it. All righty. We're still 8 picks away. I'm just gonna queue up a few guys I like now here as we approach round 6. Not a Terry McLaurin fan at all. I think that price is horrendous. I haven't drafted him a single time. I do like Brian Thomas. As you can see, the trend here with receivers, we already have Harrison and Rome, and I'm still not afraid to go Brian Thomas. I am a big believer in this rookie receiving class, and I think there's still a lot of teams that need a wide receiver 1. So we could be getting another one of them in Brian Thomas here. I do also like Kincaid. I like Kittle. I mean, we talked about Pitts getting the value boost there with our guy Cousins going there. Yet I don't think I would go Pitts above either Kittle or Kincaid. So yeah, those are a few names I've keyed up. I don't see a running back until at least one more round, I'd say, where we can kind of prey upon Montgomery, Ramondre, that round 7 to 9 running back range that we kind of highlighted as great options. So yeah, anybody catching your eye in this range?
I'm personally not a tight end guy right here. I'm not huge on Kincaid, especially. But did Kamara? Oh, Kamara just went. I was gonna say Kamara would be a running back target for me here. I'm hesitant to grab our third rookie receiver, and I'm leaning towards either Kittle or running back here.
I don't even hate Ridley though, as you know. He's talked about why he chose Tennessee. We talked about this last week in a little more depth, but talked about why he wanted to go there was because, well, he knew the boundary receiver. Hopkins has that on lock, which opens him up to be moved around more, to be that main guy. And of course, now he goes as I start to hype him up. But I wouldn't have hated Ridley there. I don't have a lot of Ridley. I mean, Aaron Jones, but we talked about our concerns with Minnesota till they at least get a quarterback in the building. I don't hate Addison, who had a great rookie year, but again, who's the quarterback? I don't know. What are you feeling?
Just given playing like that, I like Connor as well, but just playing the ADP game, we don't really need to go out and grab him here. My leans here are either Kittle or Montgomery.
All righty, Kittle and Montgomery. I don't mind Kittle at all. What's this? Recovering from core. We've had a lot of tight ends. I could see Kittle falling to us on the way back. You really don't want to go Thomas here?
I'm open to it. Those are just my top 2. He's probably the third here for me.
I have Addison up there too, assuming Drake May might go there. I'm going to go Thomas. This is just going to be our team rookie receiver, Harrison, Rome, Thomas, and we just pray that all of them land in the right spots. I can't imagine that at least 2 of the 3 don't. Harrison to the Cardinals, Rome goes to the Chargers as their number 1 for Herbert, and then Thomas falls all the way to the Bills. Ooh, this team would be insane. So yeah, I think this is now the range we will have to start looking at going a couple running backs in a row. And I'll queue up some of the guys we talked about. Mostert.
Warren is a name I like.
I do like Warren. Yeah. Oop, not Eckler. I'm not an Eckler guy. I don't know what to make of Chubb because he started in the first drafts I was doing back in February. He was going in the 60s, and I think he's deservedly kind of fallen. But he's the type of guy you get one report expected to be ready for training camp, and he is now going in the 50s. You know, at this type of draft where who knows what's going to happen, we could get the report he's not progressing as expected and is questionable for week 1. And now he's going 20 picks later. So I get that risk too. But I don't know. Chubb strikes me as the type of guy that like destroys the rehab process. And he's just made of different stuff. And he kind of reminds me of Adrian Peterson back in the day where like he tore his ACL and ran for 2,000 yards the next year as if nothing happened. Chubb could potentially do that too. So Chubb's a guy that I've started to warm up to just because he was going so much earlier. Now he's going 87. Like, I don't know.
Chubb,
Yeah.
for me, Chubb's one of those guys in my head. I want so desperately to be in on Nick Chubb just because I think he's a great running back, but I just can't do it. I don't think he deserves to be inside of the top 100 picks given his situation. So I'm just probably going to be a full fade on Nick Chubb until that price comes down. But like you said, he's one of those guys who will get steamed up after literally one positive report that comes out. So I'm bracing myself for reality where I don't have much Nick Chubb this year, and it seems like it's coming along given his current price. But I like Connor here if we're looking to grab a running back.
Yeah, Connor over Ramondre, you think?
Yeah.
With Gibson potentially siphoning that receiving work, yeah.
Gibson and just the horror show that is the New England offense.
Tell me about it. As a Pats fan, I don't even want to. No Patriots talk here. That's good. We avoided Ramondre because I don't want anything to do with that offense. Of course, Marvin Harrison will land there, and we'll talk about how good he's going to be now with Jacoby Brissett. That's one of my risks with Marvin Harrison is like truly just the Patriots. If he lands with the Patriots, then he's screwed.
Is there any reality where the Patriots don't go quarterback? I know Gerard Mayo has like hinted at like if they quote unquote get a bag for their pick, they'll trade out of it. But I don't see that reality.
Yeah, that's true. I think Marv's going to go to the Cardinals, and I absolutely love that. He's already talked about how he wants to go there. The left tackle from Ohio State, what's Paris? He's there.
Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, he's a beast. And he said he talked to Marvin Harrison, and Marvin Harrison's like, yeah, I want to be a Cardinal. I want to play with these guys. I think it'd be a perfect fit. If he landed the Cardinals, I know we got him at 20. I'll probably rank Marvin Harrison with the Cardinals as my wide receiver, like probably ahead of Devontae Adams at that point. So, and it seems very, very likely. I know we already have Lamar. Kyler just went. I was going to say we have Connor. We have who we think Marvin Harrison's quarterback's going to be. We could have gone Kyler, but he just went. I'm shocked at how far there goes Godwin there, but I think Chris Godwin came on nice at the end of the season.
He did.
I really like him there. I think that's a nice value there.
Yeah, I mean, halfway through the first half of the season, there was just ridiculous issues with his usage, just completely below his career averages, and by not a small margin. So yeah, I agree. He picked it up, and I think he's always just one of those quality guys that you can rely on to earn targets and grab him in the middle rounds. He's not someone I'm hyper targeting, but he's definitely one of those guys similar to Tyler Lockett that I think is consistently overlooked for no real reason considering the production that he's put up throughout his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do you prefer to go here? Is this where you start taking your stabs on running back, or sometimes I start going running back here, but this is like that range that Dak is going. So sometimes I'm filling out my onesie positions here. Where do you tend to go in this range?
Yeah, I do often get my onesie, especially my quarterback, like you mentioned, Dak, in this range. He has already gone. A lot of the quarterbacks have gone, which makes me feel better about our Lamar pick. This is the range where I almost always, though, go running backs. I typically come out of round 7 to 9 with 2 running back picks at least, sometimes 3. And I wouldn't hate going running back for these 3 rounds, given we already have 5 receivers. We have a quality onesie in Lamar. And all the tight ends at this point, none of them. I typically like Jake Ferguson, and maybe on the way back we can shoot for him. I like the case you spun for him too. Although the Dak, where does the Dak team in relation to us? So this guy's probably he doesn't have a tight end. So if we want Ferguson, we'd have to take him here.
No, I don't mind passing on him here.
No, there's enough running backs I'm very intrigued by.
I like Warren a lot here.
Would you go Warren over Mostert?
That is a tough one. Just, I mean, I think Warren obviously has the more. Oh, it's not even a question anymore. So
not even a question.
But just to get the take out there, I mean, Warren, you don't get the touchdowns like you do with Mostert, but I think just with the younger age and it will be impossible to project what Arthur Smith's going to do with this offense, but the pass catching and the explosiveness are obviously on Warren's side, which draws me to him. But Here, I think I'm going Mostert most of the time here. Just yeah, I think you're aware of where I stand on Nick Chubb, but
I know you are, and I'm sorry, Mo. I'm gonna override it with the. I'm going Nick Chubb. I'm
that's
telling you,
fair.
by draft season, he's gonna be going top 50
I
and
agree, but
92. I think Nick Chubb. I mean, he was off. I know he only played 2 games, but it was looking like a 2,000 yard rushing type of year. I don't have a lot of him yet. I have plenty of Mostert, so it's also part of the profile balance. This is a range actually. I just saw Chase Brown go that I don't mind Zach Moss either. I find myself going him a lot. We were talking about values. I didn't even think to highlight Zach Moss, but I am in love with Zach Moss at his 111 price tag right now. I've been scooping him a lot. I think if Mostert's there, we go him, but if not, I like going Moss.
Are you going just a hypothetical where both of them are on the board? Who are you going between the Bengals running backs right now?
I am going Moss. Both redraft. If I'm obviously there's no real redrafts going on right now, but obviously we'll see what the summer brings. But even in best ball, where I think Chase Brown's profile's favored, and I like going Moss here, but do you not like Moss?
No, I think he's fine. I prefer him to Spears. So
Yeah, and Brian
um,
Robinson's and Amir are there too. I like those guys, but
it's just
I go Moss. And here's why. We talked about this too last week when we broke down the Bengals backfield. I do think Chase Brown, more explosive guy, second fastest running back carry on his 53-yard touchdown reception. I get it. I think that role is going to evolve as a pass catcher. I'm very excited for Chase Brown. And he has that, like, if something happened to Moss, man, there's no one else right now behind him. I do think, though, one, it wouldn't shock me if the Bengals like dip in and draft like a kind of scatty back running back, and like maybe this regime isn't that committed to Chase Brown. Whereas Moss's value, unless they go and draft like Corum or someone very similar, which would kind of surprise me, there is a chance that they do that. But signing an $8 million deal, and we're looking at a guy that when he was the guy for Jonathan Taylor weeks 2 through 5, running back 4 in fantasy, taking over a goal line role that I don't have the exact numbers off my head, but we both talked about how like Mixon has led the NFL in goal line carry percentage, was third in carries from inside the 5, 10, and 20 last year. And to me, that's the Moss role. I can't imagine they're going to give that to Chase Brown. And so we're looking at kind of Moss just feels to me like David Montgomery at maybe a little bit less talented and maybe not quite the line. Certainly, I love the Lions line there. And maybe not quite the commitment to the run at the stripe either. So, like, I shouldn't say David Montgomery. There's a lot David Montgomery has working in his favor over Moss, but the same kind of mold, like a guy that can get 2 touchdowns any given week. I've been scooping Moss a ton at this plus 100 price. So I do have Moss clearly above Chase Brown myself, and just in general, one of my favorite values at running back that I would have probably highlighted in hindsight if we could rewind the show and I could go back. So yeah, that's a long-winded take on Moss. Do you think I'm insane?
I don't think you're insane, but I'm definitely exercising more caution than you are.
Yeah.
I'm working really hard to not latch on to these 4 or 5 game stretches, like where players are performing, especially with Moss, because down the stretch, he definitely lost his legs a little bit. You could tell just by watching, and the numbers back that up. So Moss just because Moss doesn't really, he's not a needle mover for me. He's gonna start out the season at minimum with the early down role and the goal line role. I think you're fair in projecting that, but if Chase Brown shows any semblance of being able to hold a 3-down workload, I think they're gonna lean towards the explosiveness of Brown, because Moss, he's a good NFL running back, but he's not explosive. He's just more of a chain mover. He's not really a difference maker in the offense. So I think Chase Brown could easily jump him just because of the explosive nature and his athletic his athletic talents. So I'm definitely a little bit more hesitant than you, but I think that Moss is still a fair click because at least early in the season he's in line for his fair share of carries.
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. I do love, for what it's worth, I have no problem drafting either one, both.
Yeah.
I think the backfield, Mixon has vacated so much as a receiver and goal line guy here. So I see a world where both of them beat their ADPs. The Moss role feels a little more sustainable with the touchdowns with the David Montgomery type profile. But yeah, I mean, there is definitely a world where this offense it hums at a better clip because Chase Brown is bringing so much unique speed out of the backfield, and that they just decide we are better with Chase Brown on the field, no matter what, and they go with him. Or if the defense falters, to me, it's like Moss is the clear bleed the clock type of guy. Chase Brown is the more come from behind type of guy. And I picture the Bengals being up more than not, but then really do I? Like, even if I think their offense is going to be good, the defense wasn't great last year. And I don't know. I could see definitely some scripts favoring Chase Brown throughout the year as well. So yeah, I like them both. Though. I like them both at their price. We haven't queued up much here. Another of the unseen running backs is Chuba Hubbard. But is there a name? I don't hate Jacoby Myers either right here. Anybody standing out to you before I make a click?
A bit of a sexier running back, Jonathan Brooks, does stand out to me here. I don't mind taking a stab on either Lockett or Brooks.
Oh, shit. So, all right, I think I moved Hubbard up in the last second.
No, you're all good.
So do you hate Hubbard? I've gotten a lot of Hubbard running back 4. He was a top 10 guy down the stretch last year, and now gets Canales, who's already professed his commitment to the run. They've added 3 beefy interior linemen and made no moves at running back yet. I think Hubbard's getting a little slept on.
I think we can. There's definitely a path this season where we look back and we say, why weren't we in on Chuba Hubbard? Miles Sanders is awful, and Raheem Blackshear is nothing. But that's what I'm scared of saying. The same thing about Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he was great, but it was also on the back of 20 carries a game for that 6-7 game stretch. And I know it's a volume driven position, but Chuba Hubbard isn't a talent that's locked up to maintain those 20 carries a game. So, but that's obviously priced in because he's going here in the 10th round. So I don't mind it because there's definitely a route where he maintains that high volume role, but I'm definitely not sold on Chuba Hubbard as a talent.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think he's good at all. No, I will never make the case that Chuba Hubbard's a great player. But I think your argument kind of almost, it spells out what I'm picturing. It's Dave Canales who fed Rachaad White, who honestly, I don't know that I'm that impressed with Rachaad White either. You know, the 3rd most targets at the position last year, the 4th most carries, the 2nd overall in opportunities. And now they make no moves at running back. And Canales has already said the running back is a position I like. And he praised Hubbard as a guy he faced the week before, in his old division. And now it's our pick. I like Ladd a lot here. And I do like Myers too. I think he's fallen too far ADP wise, but I'm open to these 3 guys. What do you think?
I like Gus here.
You like going Gus?
Gus or Ladd?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll go Gus. And then I don't think we have to draft a running back the rest of this time.
No, probably not.
Especially with these recent comments. I'm sure you saw the report, right? Like the bell cow, the goal line guy.
Yeah.
The owner saying all that stuff. And you go first, and then I'll
that's what that's what the owner is saying. I mean, in the picture, the running back, the broad picture for the running back room in Los Angeles could easily change in the next 3 weeks after the draft. And as of now, he's the de facto guy to basically do everything. But we are also still in March, and I like the price now. And I think if he can somehow avoid those landmines in the draft, his price is going to shoot up, and getting in on him now is pretty positive. And I don't know what you've been reading, but I haven't really seen much about the Chargers going running back in the first 2 days of the draft. So I think it's not super realistic, but he could end up by himself in that backfield and avoid all those landmines in the draft. So I don't mind getting in on Gus Edwards in the 11th round.
I don't at all. And I don't consider all the talk about how great this receiver class is. All the talk is this running back class is one of the worst of the last decade. Yeah. And the testing numbers mostly back that out. And I don't consider there being too many, I think Brooks, Trey Benson, maybe Marshawn Lloyd, these guys that could end up being playmakers. But even if one of those guys, and the guy I think that's likeliest to go there is Blake Corum with the connections with Harbaugh and all of that. I could see that. But even if really any of these guys land there, I don't know that Gus ever gives up that goal line role that that they know from Baltimore, that they bring on over the Ravens old owner there. it's not a surprise that he goes and gets his own guy, Harbaugh, his brother. I think Gus is probably going to be that touchdown guy that he had 13 touchdowns last year, was in a situation that he could. The ceiling there is that they don't add much, if anything, and now he's the feature back in a Greg Roman scheme that has historically made so many running backs have monstrous years. That's a ceiling that's definitely there. And even the floor, like the worst case outcome, they add a early round rookie running back. There's not a ton that I look at that would ruin why I'm drafting Gus Edwards at 125 in the first place, that he's going to score touchdowns. So I love the Gus click here.
I agree with the current price. Yeah. I mean, even if he takes away some other part of his role, if a rookie takes away some other part of his role, I think he still maintains that goal line role regardless. But I think the one thing no one's really talking about enough is, what is the overall offensive environment in Los Angeles this year? Every move they're making is pushing towards a more run-heavy offense, but it's traditionally relied on Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert, with Mike Williams mixing in some big plays when he's healthy. But I mean, there's a pretty realistic, I don't want to say it's likely, but this offense could be bad. I feel like it's not that insane to say that this just might not work out for the Chargers, and that would lead to Gus Edwards falling flat on his face. Do you think that that's something that could happen in Los Angeles this year?
I think it could, but I believe enough in Herbert that I don't think they're going to ever be bad. Like I think Gus will still have 10 plus touchdown upside, even in their like worst case. And I think Roman and Harbaugh, like, it'll be slow and methodical and kind of ugly, but they still, even that's what they were in the 49ers, and that offense still was in the top half of the league in points, even if the passing yardage wasn't there. It was always top 3 in rushing. So I think they're going to have a good run scheme, and their line is solid. I think they're going to kind of be fired up to play a little bit more bully ball and try to run it down the people's throat. Like I don't know. I don't think there's a worst case where Gus doesn't have at least 10 touchdown upside. I do like Jaden Daniels here. I know we have Lamar, but I think that kind of gives us a better shot to take a stab at a running quarterback like Jaden Daniels. Let's
go Daniels. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. I mean, we have some interesting questions that I'm on the draft screen the full time. And so I just clicked back and was like, oh crap, we have Krana here. We have a few fans tuned in. So thank you guys so much for being here. We didn't mean to ignore your questions while drafting. So I'm going to set up the draft board so you guys can see that better. And then answer some of these. So Krana coming in here, and I think we can see, there you go. You guys can see that. So thoughts on, Gus Bus is the guy we just talked about. So that's a perfect lead in. We both like it, and we both see that role continuing. I know you mentioned landmines, Mo. Like, who could they draft where you'd be like, damn, like Gus's value just absolutely tanked? Is there any running back in this class?
Well, I don't want to say that just because of the quality of this running back class, but I feel like when you're dealing with Gus Edwards, a landmine could be literally anyone, because he doesn't really bring anything to the receiving game. He broke off a couple of big receptions last year, and last year was by far his best career year out of the receiving game, and he can get it done as a runner in a good scheme, which I think the Chargers will have this year. But I think a landmine could just be if they just draft a running back in general, just because I just don't think Gus Edwards is very good.
I don't either. But again, we're drafting him for the touchdowns. What Krana just brought up, the fact that he's like kind of already been labeled the goal line guy. We're drafting him for those 2 touchdown random spikes where he pops into our lineup with 15 points, which I think is going to happen more often than people might give it credit for. Like, the biggest landmine to me would be if there's a guy that could beat out Gus at the goal line. Maybe Corum could. Like, he was an elite scorer at Michigan, tough runner, and his guy. But like, I don't know. We gotta make our pick regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what I like about him. Is I agree with you. He'll lose some volume. I like Wicks a lot here. I don't like Quentin Johnston. We don't have a tight end, but I don't know if Freiermuth's the guy.
Freiermuth is not the guy for me. I'm going Wicks here.
I love Wicks. Yeah, I'm there. And I don't actually, Arthur Smith, we know he likes his tight ends despite all the issues that Kyle Pitts had. He's still peppered as a position as a whole, the tight end position. So if Freiermuth somehow falls down to us in the next round, I'm okay with him as our top tight end. But yeah, Wicks was. I'm such a big Wicks fan that was too much. It's more the opportunity cost and less about not liking Freiermuth at this price. I don't hate it.
Are
Yeah.
you not excited for 75 targets for Darnell Washington next year because of our
The most inconsistent play caller.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
I get maybe it's the local ties, but Freiermuth's from this area. I actually teach with both his parents. They're at the same high school.
Awesome.
So yeah,
That's
he was
awesome.
he came by like a basketball game the other day that I was doing security. I was like, oh, I'll toss out Freiermuth. Imagine that'll fucking throw me through a window. But no, he seems like a great dude. His parents are good people. So maybe that's what it is. I just have the home connection here.
I like Freiermuth. I think he's fine, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna probably have nightmares of tight end usage because of Arthur Smith. I mean,
yeah,
the whole Jonnu Smith thing. Like, I don't think Jonnu Smith is horrible, but good God, the usage was infuriating last year.
It was so maddening. I know. I'm trying to think. So Arthur Smith, when he was with the Titans, though, didn't they have like?
They had Jonnu Smith.
Oh, is it Jonnu Smith? Wasn't there
Yeah.
another tight end though that was having like good years? Delaney Walker.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been playing fantasy that long that you know Delaney Walker. Oh
Delaney
man,
Walker,
that's a name toss.
he was on some of my original fantasy teams.
Yeah, so he was. Yeah, he was the guy that Arthur Smith's like first year calling plays. So we got a few more here. That we'll answer, but yeah, we'll see with Arthur Smith there. I don't know. Connor Cook, Najee Mostert, Aaron Jones. Which is best if I do the hero running back route? Who do you think?
It's Cook then Connor for me. Last year when the Browns flipped from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady, we saw a pretty significant bump in usage for James Cook, especially in the receiving game. They turned him to essentially a bell cow back after Joe Brady took over. So that's the answer for me here. And just because he's got all those other attributes, I think he's just a quality runner. He's younger than the other guys on this list. And I think other than James Conner, I think he's going to have the best. It'll be close between Connor and Cook, but I think they'll have the best usage out of this group.
Yeah, I totally agree. And of this list too, like I really like everybody on this list, but the only one where it's like we don't really know if they've peaked yet is Cook. Like he could hit another game against the Cowboys where he had like 35 points. Like, man, you use Cook like this every single game. Like he could probably do this every single game, and maybe Joe Brady finally will. We'll see. The other guys I like because you know what you're getting and there's a certainty to it. But you also, those guys are going, 3 rounds after Cook anyways. Like that's kind of baked into Cook's price. So I'd much rather start with Cook than any of these guys based on the ADP game, based on the kind of unknown ceiling. And then you can still get a Connor, a Mostert, I guess Aaron Jones's value is a little unknown because he's with the Vikings, but I don't think it went up in my opinion. The heavy hitting questions. Are you a cookies or crackers guy? Kron is classic, Mo. He comes to all the like sit start shows and will always ask like some sort of random food question every single time. It's great. So yeah, what are you, a cookies or crackers?
I'll go cookies and just say I'm pro cookie cake. You can call me a child if you want to for that, but I'm a fan. I guess if I had to pick a cracker, I'll go ahead and say Cheez-Its as well, but I wasn't exactly prepared to answer this question today.
Yeah, I got all the fantasy knowledge up in the noggin, but this is the hard hitters.
It is.
I'm more of a savory guy if I'm snacking. So I do typically lean towards crackers. That being said, obviously a good cookie, like there's a place down the street from us that does these like salted caramel cookies that are just out of this world. And my wife loves cookies. So like we end up getting cookies more often than I might normally. And then I'm always like, damn, these are fucking great. So I get it. Like a good cookie is tough to top. So like, I guess ceiling wise, I think cookies have a higher ceiling than crackers. No doubt about it. Like you
can want to spin this the fantasy way.
Yeah, exactly. In general though, I probably lean crackers, but man, like a high end cookie is a Christian McCaffrey. You can, it's our pick. So before we analyze
real
too
fantasy
much
stuff,
and Leggett went and Lloyd, who were two of the guys I felt okay about. I like Ricky Purcell here. I don't hate Will Levis, but we already have 2 good quarterbacks. We have Lamar, and we don't have a tight end yet. So likely,
sure, yeah, likely, yeah.
I go, all right. I think we got it in. Yep, we got it in.
Get off some sort of stack with Lamar.
I actually, I wouldn't hate going. Yeah, exactly. Gotta get some sort of. We can get Bateman, I'd say later too.
Yeah.
I'll queue him up so we get some stacking partners. I wouldn't rule out who did they just signed Josh Reynolds too, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean that could be a last round stab with some touchdown upside, long body. Yeah, I mean I think we're set at running back. I don't think we even have to consider if somebody falls that we love, we falls, but I think we're just kind of loading up on tight ends here at this point. I'd like to go Jonnu myself.
I was going to ask who have been your late round stabs at tight end?
Jonnu is a big one. I mean Mayer's still lingering, but I don't know that I love him yet. He did flash though. I don't. Once you get to this range, there are intrigue for me. One guy I land on a lot at his price is Sanders, just the unknown rookie, like could land there. We'll get into some. We'll probably take a tight end in our last round. I do like Conklin with Rodgers now. There. If a lot of Jets is just so much if Rodgers plays XYZ, but we've seen like Tunyon and guys have 8 to 10 touchdown seasons, and like Conklin, I think Conklin's an underrated player. So I don't hate Conklin. Jonnu's definitely the guy for me if he's there right now, speed and space, and that's what Mike McDaniels does best. And Jonnu was the fastest tight end last year on that one catch where he had like a 70-yard touchdown. I could see a lot of that happening in Miami. We already have Tyreek too, so you're kind of getting a mini team stack there for like a Week 17 blow up. Love the Dottle pick, by the way. He did end up going back to Dallas this last weekend. I meant to text you, like, Dottle's home. He's back in Dallas. I like going Jonnu here. What do you think?
I agree.
All right.
I was taking stabs at Jatavian Sanders earlier this offseason, but I saw a report today that he might be slipping into like the late third round or maybe even the fourth of the real NFL draft. So that's like got me scary because once you get into that range, you're like in the realm of potential absolute zero production.
Yeah.
I'm easing off of him. I mean, it's not like it's a big investment at pick 201, but he's definitely one of the guys that I had been previously targeting that I am not really looking at with this recent news. And I know that's kind of niche to be talking about late round stabs at tight end, but especially
we're in a position where we need some decent late round stabs. We already have 2 of them. And I don't normally even really love the likely one because it is more of a handcuff play than anything. There is the world though where like he did show so well that maybe they run a little more 2 tight end next year. And when Andrews was out, he was Mark Andrews. Like I had Mark Andrews in like 3 out of my 6 leagues, and I picked up Likely as his replacement. And my lineups didn't feel it a whole lot. Like maybe not quite Mark Andrews, but he was putting up some 15 to 20 point days. And so I don't mind Likely as a potential, but you are probably relying on an injury. I think Jonnu could be that guy. So we're in a position we need some decent tight end stabs. So I know it's niche, but I like talking about it. I'm going to give you a huge Hail Mary at tight end that we can consider with our last pick. That's Donald Parham. As a fan of the XFL, Donald Parham, 6'10" animal, was like the MVP of the XFL, just was dunking on teams. I was in my degenerate stage, which has never really left. I don't know why I'm calling it a stage. I was playing DFS XFL, and Parham was like the most expensive guy. And he's had he's had some big games at the NFL level. He's had multiple touchdown days. Greg Roman loves his tight ends. Gerald Everett's gone, and yeah, they'll probably draft somebody, but like I think Parham's gonna have a role. He gets undrafted in every league. I'm as nuts as it is. I've taken Parham as a last round stab on some like weak tight end teams. I think we're gonna get a couple big tight end days, touchdown days out of him. So that's my nichest of stabs. Talking about niche tight ends.
I think at minimum you're gonna get a couple. You're gonna get a couple of touchdowns, and if you're lucky, 1 or 2 multi-touchdown games where he's almost guaranteed to be played in your lineup that week. And with nobody else in the picture and just his frame, he projects to have great usage in the red zone and at the goal line. I mean, they already used him pretty well and pretty heavily in those red zone packages. So that's not a serious change. But with Everett out of the picture, that's just another guy he's not competing with. So I agree. You're not looking for much other than just hoping he grabs a couple of games with multiple scores or just a handful of games, like maybe 6 touchdowns on the year, and he plays in your lineup 3-4 weeks, I think that's a win with Parham.
Yeah, I think there's very little world where Parham, you know, is the featured guy, but like there is the chance that they, you know, the Chargers need a tight end, and the very rare chance that they don't draft. I mean, Brock Bowers, are they really going to pass a receiver to get him? Probably not. So then you're looking round 2, 3, and like they're going to make an investment in the position, but there is a world where like Parham somehow is the number one guy in a Greg Roman offense that loves tight ends. Whether it's Andrews, Vernon Davis, you know, he is an athletic guy. Like his last game last year, I think he had like 100 yards. He was like, I've just seen him be the focal point of passing offenses at the XFL level before, yes, but he's had these glimpses of like making plays after the catch and whatnot. To me, he's the guy too. Like if they didn't make any moves, you could suddenly see him going as a top 12 to 15 tight end. I would myself have him ranked there, whether I have to actually draft him there or not. If they make no moves, like that offense has been so good at featuring tight ends. And I'm how long can we go about Donald Parham on a draft stream? But I love him. I think we got to get some Donald Parham on this team.
I'll hopefully close the action here with this comment. I don't see a world where they don't add another tight end. And if this isn't analysis by any means, but I think it's funny that the Chargers on their official team website don't even list a tight end one. They've got Donald Parham as the second tight end and just open slot as their tight end one, as if it's waiting to be filled by someone else.
They know.
He's gonna play a role in the offense, but I don't know. I don't think it'll be too significant.
Yeah, I like Corley a lot here. CJ compared him to a Deebo Samuel, and I like CJ's rookie receiver analysis. So that's
I don't mind taking looks at the super dynamic guys. Yeah, late in drafts, and I can't say I watched too much of Corley while he was in college. I've seen the highlights during the pre-draft process, but yeah, he seems to be very dynamic. I did see CJ's comment on him earlier today that he's a lot of people pretending to be Deebo Samuel-esque, but he actually is. So yeah, I think the film backs that up on Corley. So, but yeah, those dynamic guys, I'm always a fan of.
Yeah, we got Kron's got a few more, but I want to pull up this one. So I think this was where we were like debating like Mostert or Chubb or you know, in that 100 range. And this is an interesting take that Kazi TX has. And I don't know if you're still with us, Kazi. I'd love to talk further of this if you want to throw more in the chat. I am very intrigued by Zamir White. It's not someone you asked me about him a couple weeks ago, Mike, and I wrote about him. I'm not sure we've talked about him since. He had 3 straight to end the year, 18 to 20 point days, and like that was without scoring touchdowns. He just kind of was the featured back, and I think he topped out at like the running back like 11 or 12, but still was really, really solid on the volume he got. I don't know if you've seen like his press conferences where he shows up, but he's like an absolute monster. And he talked about in his presser, like his offseason workout plan is like he works like with his grandfather, like just like wrangling horses and like throwing hay. He said like throwing hay bales and just like I'm sure he does regular workouts too, but he called himself like country strong. And I was like, that's fucking, I love that somebody's just like, I'm just like built off of just being like the man. Like, I'm just like, you know what I mean? Like he just, I love that story. It's a weird narrative, but I'm just like, I'm about it. So I don't know. He just looks like an animal. Like he's jacked, you know?
I've seen the clips the last few weeks. Yeah. The guy's an absolute unit.
Yeah.
Like, I think this is a lot of function of just how Antonio Pierce wants to operate his team. He said early on before Josh Jacobs went down, I'll continue after we make our pick here. It is the grossest pick to say that I like Tyler Conklin here, but yeah.
I do too.
Our tight end outlook is scary, and he seems to be the best option here. But
I agree.
Antonio Pierce down the stretch last season, he was saying along the lines of, when Josh Jacobs gets 20 carries, we win football games. And I think this is just a function of the coaching style of Antonio Pierce, that he's a fan of just riding one back. And if you can produce in that workhorse role, he'll just keep you as the workhorse. And and both running backs were doing that last year, both White and Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs wasn't as great as we had been accustomed to, at least in the previous season. But Zamir White was able to pick up and look fine. And if he can hold on to that role where Antonio Pierce likes to run just one back for the most part, I think he'll end up being very valuable. But I am, once again, I feel like I say this about every running back, but I'm just hesitant because of the talent and the fact that I think that they're not done adding. And Alexander Madison of Vikings running game horror show last season. But does he suck enough that he's not going to eat into Zamir White's workload? Like 5 carries.
Yes, he sucks enough.
You don't think he's going to get anything in Las Vegas?
I don't think so. Honestly, if White, I really think so. I've agreed on your take for most of these running backs. Like Gus Edwards, I don't think is anything special. And I get that we're drafting volume. Chuba Hubbard, I get that too. I think Zamir White has a bit of a gear that he's still young. He 99th percentile 40. I think he ran like a 4.37 for like a 210 guy that's known as Zeus because of his just like physique and how he's got a little more wiggle and juice that especially in straight line speed than some of these other guys we're talking about. And like you said, when Pierce loved him, because when I was writing my article on him, I just kind of was sifting through what has Antonio Pierce said about Zamir White. He's like, if Josh Jacobs is back, great. But if not, we have full confidence in Zamir White to handle the role and handle the load, and multiple conversations like that. And their GM at the combine did mention like it's a 2-back league. You need multiple guys, but I don't know. I don't think Madison is that guy. I think they're definitely going to add a rookie, but I think Zamir White's going to get a crack at it. And he's a player. I had him in a lot of like pickups last year. And I remember it was a Thursday night. I was watching him very closely because we had a live stream and everybody was asking about Zamir White. And I was kind of 50-50. Me and Nat were split. And then he ended up having like a nice 18-point day. So it wasn't anything crazy, but he did that without like scoring, if I'm not mistaken. He ran for like 150 and just like, I don't know, he popped. Like my very limited sample size of Zamir White, he showed more of a gear than the Chuba Hubbards, than the other backs, even the Zach Mosses that we took it to pick 100. Like, I think there's more to Zamir White than some of these other backs. So it does depend on who else is there and what happens. But I don't think Kazi's necessarily wrong. Like that Zamir White at least deserves mention. Like we didn't really cue him up at all when we were talking those backs. So like I kind of want to scroll back because it is an important range to get right too. So that was in this like, where did Zamir White go? By the way, earlier in a draft this offseason, I got Zamir White at like 140. It was
before Jake left.
Yeah, exactly. Zamir White 104. So he did go in this range. So that's going to be something that I'd like to go back to that and look at those backs and kind of analyze those. Mostert, Moss, Eckler, Zamir White, and does he belong there?
I'm looking back now at Zamir White's numbers when he took over for Jacobs late in the season. 4 straight games with at least 20 touches, cleared 100 all-purpose yards in all of those games but one, so 3 of 4, 1 touchdown in those 4 games, and then every single game he was a top 20 running back in all 4 games. So
yeah,
I mean, this isn't like hard-hitting analysis to say, but if he's finishing in the range with those 15 to 20 touches a game, I think he'll end up being a value. But once again, it's just really hard for me to convince myself of Zamir White seeing 15 to 20 touches a game.
Yeah, I do feel you there. I don't know. It really depends on what they do in the draft. But like, if he's in the role he's in right now, he's gonna probably see 15 to 20 touches a game, and he's probably gonna do close to what he was doing. So.
And Antonio Pierce as the head coach, it makes me want to say, that he will continue in that role. But yeah, you just never know. It'll be much easier to project. It won't be easy, but it'll be easier to project after the draft. So
yeah,
but we'll see who they add there.
So of this range where White was the last back and our commenter said he'd go White first, I'd always go Mostert over him. Other than that, I kind of like the order these guys went, although I have Eckler probably lower and Spears a little lower. I'd rather have White than Spears, probably White over Eckler, Moss, and probably White over Robinson, given that I wouldn't want Eckler there. Moss versus White's an interesting one, where I think Moss is in a much better home. I think White's a decent talent jump, but maybe not that much because Moss really did look good as the Colts guy. So I like our pick, but yeah, if nothing happens with White, I think right in this range is where he's probably going to stay. And I don't know. He does intrigue me. I've clicked on him when Mostert and Moss are not there though. Like I wouldn't go him. What about you? Like, is there where do you draw the line with some of these backs in White?
The first question I have is, I'm not so sure if White stays there if he leaves the draft as the top guy, but that's to debate once the
I
draft
don't
is
see him
over.
rising above like Najee, Ramondre. I think like maybe he goes to that range, but I don't see him going too much higher.
No, probably not too much higher past those guys, Najee and Ramondre. But I'm finding myself liking Brian Robinson just because people say that Eckler is gonna take the work away from him, but Eckler got brought in to be the receiving back, and Brian Robinson has never relied on the receiving game to produce. As we're on the clock here, do we just go with Parham and bank on a couple of multi-touchdown games here?
I think we could, yeah. And then we'll figure out receiver at the end for one more receiver. But I think this is a 4 touchdown build. The fact that Parham, so he hasn't been even on the draft. Like I've had to scroll down to find him. He's starting to pop up here. So I must be I thought I was kind of like coming out of complete left field with him, but other people are drafting him. It looks like.
I think especially with the Everett news that he officially signed somewhere else as well.
Yeah, must be. I think.
Getting back to those the running backs, I think that clump is all pretty fairly priced right now, just considering the possibility of any of those backfields adding someone. But I agree that I'm taking Zamir White over Eckler. And I'm taking him over Spears as well. But for me, between Zamir White, Brian Robinson, and Zach Moss, it's kind of a toss-up. Those guys are all kind of jumbled up for me, and it'll come down to how this offseason shakes out. But for now, I'm taking Zach Moss ahead of him for sure.
Yeah. One other thing too is Minshew did like checking down. He always has. So that, if it does, White can catch. He's not like the prototypical back, but it's another thing to consider. One point I wanted to bring up, because it's a player we dismissed earlier because of his 40 time, Audric Estime, the rookie from Notre Dame. So I think a lot of people, he was going before that dreadful 40 time. He was going like 120, like the Blake Corum range, and understandably dropped huge with that god awful 4.7 like lineman 40. I'm not justifying that. But on his pro day, which I know it's pro day and maybe a little more generous, but he ran a 4.58 at like 230, 3 down back material, like same pedigree as Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame, like slow 40, but had a good 3 down skill set, was a good runner. And he had like a couple 70-yard touchdowns in college. I looked back and like was capable of the big play. So now that he ran the 4.58, they like reran the RAS, like the athletic score, and it was like now towards the top percentile rather than being one of the worst. And his price is now still in that like gross 190s, because I don't think a lot of people recognize his pro day went significantly better. And then it just kind of prompted in my mind, like, are we really putting like 45? Like again, he was going like 120s, 70 picks on a 40 time at a position where speed never has been crucial, especially at that size. And now that worry is actually gone. In fact, improved. So I don't know. It's just one guy I know we've kind of just crossed off and not thought about, and I've started to think a lot more about. So what are your gut reactions to Audric? Is it Estime?
Audric Estime.
Estime. Okay.
So one thing I want to say first is I did see that he improved his 40 time during his pro day, but I did see D-Bro Derek Brown over at Fantasy Pros. He took a look at the clip, and based on the time of the video, it seems that it was closer to like a 4.6. And this is absolute nonsense diving into like
this is absurd.
This is crazy. But I'm just there's other rookie running backs that I like more, and I haven't considered him too heavily at his new price, just because after I saw that 40 time, like you said, I was basically out. But I'm still scared like of him just being an absolute zero, and I'm trying to avoid those on. Obviously, anyone's trying to avoid those on their roster.
We're
but
talking 190 though, and like
yeah,
maybe the
yeah.
only back in this class that like somehow could be 3 down skill set.
Yes, and I think at 190, yeah, taking, yeah, I'm more okay to take on that risk at 190 than what it was a week ago. So
He's a
I'm
guy I
happy.
want to bump. All I'm getting at is he's a guy I want to bump my exposure to that I
Yeah,
had been drafting even at an expensive price. Stopped drafting when I saw the time, and now I'm like, should I have reacted that much to the time? Especially with it potentially rebounding. So yeah, we'll see. You don't have to jump on with me, but I'm into it. Do you think we go Reynolds and stack up Lamar with him? Do we
yeah,
go Johnny
yeah.
Wilson? You think
Let's go
Reynolds?
Reynolds. Just yeah, give him a
Oh, he didn't even
back.
sign though. He
Yeah.
visited.
Is that what we talked about earlier? Yeah, he's
Yeah, I
not
thought
signed.
he signed with them. I didn't know it was
Oh,
just a visit.
the last
Uh,
report on his Roto World page was him just having visited. Yeah.
yeah, damn. I like Johnny Wilson. He was one of those like athletic freak receivers that rose in the draft process. So you just never know. Probably a zero, but um my guy Demarcus Robinson was gone. Darius Slayton was gone. Some of my favorite last round stabs. Is there? That's what we probably could have broken down better. Is for or maybe we do this for our next like lead in is like who are the last couple round guys that you are interested in. But so maybe that'll be our feature next week before we draft. But like give us a sneak preview, Mo. Who's like a guy that we could have maybe considered here?
One guy that I may just be holding on to hope for recklessly. Yeah, I guess recklessly is the best word there, but just unintelligently is Alec Pierce. I've always
Yeah.
liked the guy's profile, and I might be pulling at straws here, but I mean he's going to be the downfield guy once again next year for the Colts. At least at this point, we don't know what's going to happen before August, but at this point he's shaping up to be the downfield guy for the Colts, and he's going drafted in some drafts, not all of them, but the new look Colts with Anthony Richardson, hopefully airing the ball out and getting the ball to his downfield threat. And Alec Pierce, I still like the talent. I'm not completely out on him. I thought he was a solid late round receiver last year. Obviously, that stab didn't pan out, but he's not even going drafted in every single draft. So I don't mind grabbing him here and there in the last round.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. I feel like the receivers just a couple weeks ago were a lot like so I have a lot of Demarcus Robinson, as you know.
Yeah.
And Noah Brown was going in the last round just a couple weeks ago. And same with Darius Slayton, who's still kind of going those last 2 rounds. Those are guys that I've been clicking a lot. Because I think all of those guys, Brown, Robinson, and Slayton, particularly Robinson, but of those three, like every single one of them will have at least 2 18-plus point days and be in my lineup, so they're not complete zeros. And maybe one of them catches fire. Slayton caught fire for a stretch run last year. The one guy that I'm now getting drawn to is Greg Dortch, who I think we drafted in our last draft.
Yeah,
he's kind of become the guy that's always there in those last couple rounds. And Treylon Burks is becoming forgotten, and probably understandably so. I've never been a huge Burks fan, but we'll talk freak athletes and was once he was going to be their AJ Brown replacement, which is so mind-numbingly dumb. But regardless, there was a body of work that at least was intriguing enough for a first-round draft pick. Probably a nothing, but he had glimpses as a rookie where he really did look like he was one of those guys that popped and got hurt last year, had a knee injury that just he never seemed fully back from. And will he ever be back? I don't know. Will he even get a volume if he is back now that you got Ridley and and Hopkins there? Probably not. But if this becomes a significantly more pass-happy attack and they don't make another move, which is a big if, they probably will draft a receiver. I don't know. As a last stab, he's kind of becoming a guy I don't hate. I do prefer Dortch right now, but those are a couple of mine. Wait, what was it? Remind me of the one that you had said. I didn't even react to it properly, though. I wanted to build on your point.
Alec Pierce is someone
yes.
that they just I like Downs out of the slot, and Pittman's great, but I'm not. I like Downs, but he obviously profiles as a very different receiver than Alec Pierce, and they don't really have a guy that he's competing with for that field stretcher role. So yeah. I'm interested, and
didn't get drafted, by the way, in ours. I was just looking it up.
Yeah, I saw him on the list. Yeah, But with Anthony Richardson has the ability to get the ball downfield. We all know about the cannon of an arm that he has. So I wouldn't be shocked. I think that just knowing Gardner Minshew as a player, Anthony Richardson will be more inclined to push the ball downfield than Minshew was last year. It was a lot of that RPO action to Michael Pittman, those quick hitting slants, and that's how Michael Pittman ended up with a lot of targets last year. There's no one else who really fills this role for Indianapolis, and he's one guy that I kind of just I latched onto him when he was a rookie.
Me too.
I'm a fan of the talent, and given his literal last round price, I'm not passing. Like I'm not targeting him in every single draft in my last round pick, but I'm open to grabbing him just because I'm not completely convinced that he's total dust.
I'm with you. And he probably falls under that same boat of guys we were just highlighting, and Noah Brown, DeMarcus, and Slayton, where like there will be an 18 to 20 point day or two at minimum next year. Even last year, when he did almost nothing, he still had 2, I think, 18 to 20 point days. So he's got that. I'm with you. I loved him as a rookie. I picked him up in all my leagues and played him a few weeks where he had like he had to like not target hog, but was far more than we're just whipping it deep to you a few times a game and maybe not a MVS type of guy. He showed more than that. And all the training camp buzz last year was that like the route trees expanded, that he could be an alpha. And I don't know that we'll ever get to that level when you don't show up at all in year two. But I'm with you. Like as a last round guy, I am intrigued by him and then the mesh with Anthony Richardson. I think that's a good call. And I haven't drafted much of him. And he went undrafted here. Would I have rather him than Johnny Wilson? Yeah, I think so. So that's a good one. I kind of pulled up these last few rounds just to look at. So we like highlighted what we're going to go into this in more depth and give you more reasoning next week. So I guess we shouldn't give them all away. But there are quite a few on this that I do like, and quite a few that I was getting 2 weeks ago. Again, Jonnu Smith was a last round pick 2 weeks ago. So we can kind of look at that too, like who was last round picks that has risen up and isn't anymore. I mean, Darnell Mooney, I wasn't drafting much of, but look at that, undrafted in a lot of drafts, now going to 150. It's
as the fourth option at with a
what are we
36-year-old coming off an Achilles at I guess I guess I get the argument, but not really.
I do love Zeke at this price because there's a world where he becomes the Cowboys feature back this year.
It's a frightening world, but it is possible.
It's frightening, but it's there. The opportunity's there. Either a rookie's going to go there and be like a top 15 running back, or it's going to be Zeke and he's probably going to be a top 20 running back and it's going to be ugly. Or we'll get like a flashy rookie that is like a sexy top 15 guy.
Someone will have to skyrocket up the draft boards because they're the Cowboys quarterback.
Yeah,
it's having to happen to someone.
That could be so. Either we do late round picks next week, or we could do what's probably more actually useful for like this specific time period is like, what are the most valuable openings and or like archetypes that could just like skyrocket? Like who are the most volatile openings, and just we could also do like openings and players, but what is going to happen that will send something up and down the board, and what players are kind of attached to that right now, if that makes sense. That could be a really good topic. I think that might be a fun one if we want to do that next week.
Yeah, that is something that that will be available on rotostreetjournal.com in written content from me, specifically pertaining to running backs, just pinpointing those volatile backfields where overlooked player could easily emerge as the top guy. We saw it a couple of times last year, but most notably was Kyren Williams. I don't want to say that it's finding the next Kyren Williams, because I don't think we'll ever see something like that again, where a guy's going undrafted in these 20-round drafts, but then is a top 5 running back in terms of points per game.
It's not undrafted if you followed Roto Street Journal at all.
That is true. Undrafted in a lot of drafts, but not in the Wolves drafts. But like I was saying, just trying to find a guy who can overtake a backfield that doesn't feature a particularly talented back, I think it's valuable every year, but especially now that running back prices are getting pushed down, I think hitting on those guys who overcome and overtake the questionable backfields in the NFL, I think it'll be incredibly valuable. So yeah, I think we can talk about that on the pod next week, and look out for that in written form from me.
Yeah, and I guess that's maybe why I got so long-winded on Estime. It just reminds me of Kyron. Maybe it's just the Notre Dame connection, but big guy that didn't have a great test. Like he could land in a backfield. Let's say he lands with the Chargers. He might be a bigger threat to be a landmine to Gus Edwards because he is also like a 240-pound bull that maybe just becomes a 3-down guy. Like that, while you're describing your article, you don't have to toss in Estime, but I think that's a name that maybe consider tossing in there. But I think that'll be a fun topic, like the roles that are still open and what's there. We have a couple other really good questions here, and I think this kind of alludes to one of those roles. If Chargers gets Neighbor or possibly Harrison, I think the Chargers wide receiver 1 is definitely one of those value holes where like whichever rookie lands there, likely a top 5 pick. That's going to be possible top 15 to top 12. If it's Neighbors or Harrison, definitely a top 12 upside. And even like Rome I'd consider a potential top 12 guy. That's how good I think these big 3 receivers are of this class. So that's a hypothetical. So yeah, let's say it's Neighbors who's going late 3rd in a lot of these drafts right now. He went a little early in ours. He went early 3rd before our 3rd round pick even. But where do you see him going if he's the Chargers number 1? It's a great question from Cron.
So I think just to start with Harrison, I think Harrison's going to be a 1-2 guy, basically no matter where he goes.
Yeah.
Like in the weird world where he ends up in New England, which I don't think is going to happen. Like maybe he falls a little bit, but Arizona, Los Angeles, or almost anyone, if someone were to trade into one of those picks, I've seen a couple of mocks where that happens. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think
who do you see getting traded in? I haven't seen many mocks like that yet. I don't see a lot of mocks, but yeah, who do you see get in?
Jets trading into that.
The Jets.
I also saw one where the Bengals traded up for Marvin Harrison, which is obviously nonsense. Like some trade involving T. Higgins and another first to move up and get like it. So
that would be wild. Actually, I don't think it ever happens. There's no world that happens, but man, it's fun to think about.
But I think that basically no matter what, he ends up being a 1-2 turn guy. And then Neighbors, I think, especially if he ends up in Los Angeles, I think we'll see him as a late 2nd guy. Yeah. And I think that I will be hesitant at that price, just given the schematic changes that I think we're going to be seeing in Los Angeles. But I love Neighbors as a prospect. I mean, I would be happy to have him on. The Bengals are my actual team. I would be happy to have him in Cincinnati. I think he's a great player. But if he does come up into the back of the 2nd round, he'll probably be the 12th receiver taken off the board, and that'll make me hesitant. But I probably won't be fully out, but definitely cautious at that price.
Yeah, so this is where I agree with you. I think regardless of where he lands, it's kind of just like all these free agent running backs where like Jacobs finally lands, then he goes up 2 rounds. Like once Neighbors lands, and same with Harrison, no matter where they land, they're just going to kind of go up because you know what it is. And I do think the Chargers seems like a really realistic spot. And I totally get like it seems a little unideal because it's Greg Roman and they've never been higher than like the 28th in pass attempts. And I get all it. There's no real silver lining to it in a volume perspective, but he has, even though it's like a low total pie, it has typically been like a ton of running back volume, a great tight end getting featured. And then there's like a Crabtree or a Bolden, or there is usually like a Hog number 1 that like gets like 140 looks of the like 300 total attempts, but like half of them go to one guy. And like Neighbors, Harrison, Rome, any of those 3 could be that guy. And it's from Justin. If it was coming from a garbage quarterback, it's like, whatever. We're talking about Justin Herbert, who fed like Keenan Allen at age 35, 100. No slight on Keenan Allen, but like, and this is a different system. And yet Keenan Allen was just getting fed. So like whoever that number 1 for the Chargers is, if it's Neighbors, I'll take him. I would take him over DJ Moore, Diggs, Olave, maybe Ayuk over Achane. Like I could see myself settling in Neighbors in this 20, right where you're saying you're scared of him. If he's the Chargers number 1, and whoever the Chargers number 1 rookie ends up being, for us, I think we got to hope it's Rome. I mean, imagine that if we got him at 53, because Rome even would be going probably late 3rd. That's it. Yeah, Chrono, you're kind of illustrating what the topic will be next week. This is a fun thing to talk about, is like these value holes and what's the ideal fit in fantasy for us, and who else would be involved. And we have like one or two more questions. I do want to just say, like, last week, Twitter questions were coming in. I'm not seeing them today. So if you're asking questions on Twitter, I promise I'm not ignoring you. Maybe you're not. Maybe it's just you're watching and great. But it looks like we have a lot of people watching on Twitter, which is awesome. Thank you so much. I want to make sure you know I'm not ignoring your questions. They're not popping up this week, and maybe there's just no questions from Twitter, and that's totally that happens, I guess. But it feels weird because we got like 30 questions from Twitter last week, and they're not popping up right now. So not to force you to come over to our YouTube, but if you did have questions and you wanted them answered, the YouTube would be the spot they're actually popping up right now. So just throwing that out there. I hope no one on Twitter thinks I'm ignoring them. And then Krana says, we already kind of talked about Chubb a bit, but let's say Chubb's on the PUP. That's where I become like, I don't know. I don't love these, but in like a redraft league where you do have an IR spot, I actually kind of like these. Like Chubb would probably fall to 120, and I'd probably take him right there because it's like I'll stash him for 6 weeks in my IR, and then he probably comes off fresh. You know, that's like a full year and a few months removed from ACL. And at this point, I feel like he'd be coming in at 100 almost. So it would depend like how far he's falling. But I'd say in a redraft where I have an IR spot, so it doesn't really cost me a bench position at all, I'd be more than okay around that 100 to 120 is probably where I picture it. Best ball becomes different. But I don't know. Even in best ball, though, it's like you could get that late season surge from Chubb. Like you get into the playoffs and you're one of the few teams that have Nick Chubb. So I don't know. Like, what do you think? If he's on the PUP, guaranteed to miss, what's that, 4 games now?
Yeah, on the pup, it's 4 games, so you're not getting him back until week 5 at minimum. And if he hits the pup, that has me concerned for just the overall recovery, just in general, that it's just not going well. But I think I'm in the same range as you. I think I'm like, if he hits the pup and he's missing 4 games, I think it's about the double-digit rounds. Is where we can expect to be comfortable taking Chubb. And I think that's probably where he'll go, is somewhere between rounds 10 and 12. But I have a feeling that regardless of how it shakes out, just the public perception of Chubb just being this like absolute beast and freak athlete, I think that will have people too excited about his recovery, and it'll push his price up to a place that I'm personally not going to be comfortable taking him. But we'll just have to wait and see. It'll end up being a lot having to do with those training camp reports and just those little tidbits that we get throughout the offseason. I think he's one of those players that will be heavily driven by those random buzzy beat reporter tweets and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I said I don't know that I'll fall for some of them myself. I love where we got him tonight at 92. I don't know that he'll ever go lower than this other than a PUP situation, and I don't think we're going to have that. I just anticipate Nick Chubb being the type of guy that's like, Chubb looks like Nick Chubb in training camp, and it's like, oh shit, we should have been taking him in round 4. That's my prediction for how it goes. It could obviously go any other way, but just as somebody who's bet on Chubb throughout his career, and it's almost always helped me. So maybe I'm a little biased because of how good he's been to me in the past. But I just feel like ACLs are a different beast at this point. So yeah, I'm not worried about Chubb. And I think even if he's going to miss 4 games, and if that gives me a discount, great. But if not, I'm still happy to have him for what a locker room. I talked about this too. There's a season, and it looks like Twitter questions are working great. That's popping up now. And T-Money with a good one. So I'm excited to get to this as Pitt's ready for a breakout year. But to just wrap up the Chubb conversation, when you talk about intangibles from the fantasy perspective, your fantasy locker room, there was a season where I was in like 7th, 6th fighting for that last spot. And I traded, I had CMC who was going to miss like 3 games, and he ended up getting shut down for the year. So it worked out brilliantly. But at the time it was like, this guy was in first. He wanted to get the number 1 player in fantasy for a stretch run. And he gave me Chubb, who was just coming off his own injury. Locker room turned around, immediately won like the last 5 games, the playoffs. I didn't end up winning that. I think I went to the semis and petered out, but it was just like you felt the Nick Chubb presence. It was great. So you can't underrate that.
Go back to the drawing board and start more heavily considering locker room presence. So
you have to.
That's something I'm clearly not weighing in enough.
You're not weighing your fantasy locker room enough.
Obviously not.
And that's why you keep ending up with Kyle Pitts, a locker room cancer, some might say. No, I I'm very excited for Kyle Pitts. I'll let you start off because I know you liked him last year and you probably like him a whole lot more now. And I think for good reason. But I'm excited. I think he is ready, T-Money. And Mo has a great take on why.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this a little bit when Kirk announced his move to Atlanta. I don't think Pitts is the biggest winner from the move from Kirk Cousins. I think it's Bijan Robinson. And that's also just like coupled with the coaching changes that we've seen in Atlanta. But of the two main pass catchers that people are targeting, I prefer Pitts over Drake London just at cost. Drake London getting steamed all the way up into the mid round.
16 overall in this draft.
Early second round. So just at cost, it's a pretty easy call on Pitts for me. But I'm trying to keep myself reserved on Kyle Pitts. I think where his price is now is fair. He's going in the mid to late sixth round now. And if I'm not mistaken, that's about where he was last year. He was floating around that 7th round range last year. So
early 6th in this one, pick 63 for us, just for context.
Okay. And I'm comfortable with him at that price. I think he'll end up returning value on his ADP at that price. But once again, he's one of those guys in Atlanta offense in general that I think we'll see coming up draft boards throughout the offseason. And once Pitts, if Pitts hits that like mid round 5, like late round 4 threshold, I'm going to start to probably be off of Pitts. But at this price, I don't know if I'll call it a breakout because he had 1,000 yards in his rookie season. But at the price, I think Pitts will be a good pick.
So here's where I disagree a little bit do I think he's ready to break out from what he's done relatively in his career? 110%. And what he's done as a rookie, 1,000 yard, very impressive and impressive freak athlete. I get all that. Could he explode and be a top 3 tight end? Yes, there is the ceiling there based on the athleticism, based on some of the glimpses we've seen, and based on Kirk Cousins, if he's fully healthy, feeding his weapons, always feeds them well. But I'm uncomfortable with him going. I know you said you're not a huge fan of Kincaid. I did actually want to come back to that. So this gives us a quick opportunity. You brought up James Cook improving under Brady. The other guy that started to take off was Kincaid. There was some receiver, injuries around him, but it was like Gabe Davis, who's always hit or miss. Kincaid just became a steady, like 8 to 10 targets. I had Kincaid and Laporta in a couple leagues, and I would flex Kincaid because he was just getting 8 to 10 looks every week. And it was part of the Joe Brady scheme. And they talked about that in their, the combine conference. I read all the transcripts of the combine pressers, and Kincaid they talked about just Joe Brady and the offensive tight ends and running backs getting more used and how that is part. You look back to the Carolina days and how he used weapons. So I like Kincaid. I like Kincaid more than Pitts. I like Kittle more than Pitts. I probably like Evan Ingram, who was 3rd in the league in targets last year, a little more than Pitts. So I don't think I'm going to land much Pitts. Maybe though, I want some in best ball because I acknowledged there is this the freakish profile, but the other factor that I don't know that a lot of people are talking about with this huge upgrade to London Pitts is what if Kirk Cousins is on the PUP himself? Since when is an Achilles injury nothing? Maybe Rodgers is going to come back fully good, but I think a lot of people are like, oh, Rodgers was almost back this year, so now Achilles don't matter. I don't know if we've seen people ever come back from Achilles injuries. So there's the risk that it's like another Matt Ryan situation where he just kind of hurt and comes back and it just sucks and it's not that good. So I'm not really in on Pitts or London at these prices. I think either way, Bijan, as you mentioned, is going to be very intriguing just because of Robinson's usage, regardless of how the quarterback thing plays out. But there's a bit of risk to Pitts and London that I think Kirk Cousins in a best case blows both of them up to the moon. And I think I'll draft with some of that in mind, but I don't know. I haven't been a Pitts guy at his price yet in his career, and it hasn't hurt me. And that just kind of, sometimes it just comes down to that for me too. So
the one thing I will say, I agree that I don't think people are weighing in Kirk off the injury as much as they should. But when I don't want to say this, a 6th round pick is a nothing pick, but it's not like if Kirk is a problem, you're wasting your 2nd round pick on Drake London. And I don't know, that's not necessarily a fair comparison, but I feel like it's not the end of the world for missing on a 6th round pick versus your 2nd round pick. And that's not a great reason to be ahead on Pitts ahead of London. But I don't know, just of these 2 pass catchers, I'm just having a really hard time buying the London price.
Yeah, it's definitely a higher opportunity cost with London. I get that too. I would be more willing to absorb Pitts than London at this point. And also just because I was, London was going round 4 when I was starting to do these things in early February. And I have plenty of him already. So it's kind of nice when you have a lot of a guy and then his price skyrockets and you don't really need to force that price. I still think I get what you mean. There's definitely a lower opportunity cost as a 6th rounder, but like we're still talking about, again, those tight ends I like more. Kincaid, Kittle, maybe Ingram. Ingram, I probably would go Pitts over Ingram for the ceiling, but I would definitely go Kincaid or Kittle over him. And then you're also looking at David Montgomery, Calvin Ridley, maybe a Dak Prescott, like if you want to get your quarterback anchor. So it's not that there's no opportunity cost either, though. So
yeah,
I'm still treading cautiously with Pitts myself.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see where it settles out because this is far from the last time that we will be discussing Falcons ADPs this offseason. That'll definitely be one of the hot button groups of players to be discussing over the offseason. So there will be a lot of fluctuating and change of stances over the next couple of months. So
my guess is they're only going to rise too, as like I think Cousins probably will. My guess is it does work out. I know I poured a lot of cold water on it, but my gut says it works out. And as it works out more and more, the prices are going to. That's what scares me. Is like the prices are going to continue to climb. So that does worry me. There is just the risk that maybe that cold water does end up coming out too. I don't know. It's at their prices, it's tough. I do think Bijan's like a good way to get exposure to the Cousins surge with like also like even if Cousins isn't amazing, he's probably going to get Kyron Williams usage and he's a freak. So like it's going to work well. So yeah, you can still get and then it's only augmented if Kirk Cousins is doing well, then damn, now we got that many more touchdown opportunities and probably we talked about good quarterbacks using the running backs in the receiving game, those pocket passers that can't run it themselves, certainly off an Achilles injury. It could really behoove. I am loving getting Bijan in those top 6 picks.
I think, I was out on him in that range last year, but this year definitely
same.
Someone I'm interested in.
Yeah. Yep. I think even just from the play caller upgrade, it's enough. And then the Kirk Cousins could be that much better. I don't even know off the top of my head, who's like the backup for Cousins? Do you know off the top of your head?
Is it Heineke still?
Is it Heineke or Ritter still? I don't know if they brought in somebody
Ritter
else.
got traded to the Eagles.
Oh yeah. Right? Where did he get traded? Yes, he got somewhere.
He got traded somewhere. I'm not particularly concerned with the future career of Desmond Ritter.
No, me neither.
As far as I'm aware, the only backup is Taylor Heineke.
Yeah. I'd like to see something else there.
A
nice little buoy. But no, it's a good question. I feel like we're going to talk about Pitts quite a bit more this offseason. So thank you, T Money, for a good conversation point, and Krana and Kazi TX. A lot of good questions. Would love to get more and more of you guys asking the questions. We got it's great to see all these Mondays. I thought it was the free agency rush that we'd have a bunch of views for the excitement of that, and they might disappear. But maybe a little downtick today. Still over 200 of you here watching with us. That's awesome for the offseason. I'm pumped to see it. And we'd love to interact with you guys more. That's kind of the fun of these drafts, is a little more free fall. We'll have our featured topic before we go for about 30 to 40. It's turned out to be like 40 minutes each time. And that's cool. In my opinion, people seem to be fine with it. And then we'll draft and answer your questions. So we'd love to have more of you coming in and asking questions, but really appreciate you either way tuning in during the off season. Clearly you're a fantasy nut if you're watching this stuff right now. So that's the people we love. So thanks for being here. On your way out, if you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, would be awesome. We'll be live again 4 p.m. next Monday. It's just like a nice, maybe other people feel the same. I feel like it like eases me into the week. Like I'm like, I know I have a good draft like later. So, I can start my week out tonight. I mean, Mo will ham up some fantasy and do a draft. So maybe the viewers feel the same way. Ease into your week with some fantasy. Hopefully you all feel the same way, because I enjoy it very much. So
always a good way to kick off the week. I would have to agree.
That's awesome, Mo. Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for being here. Thank you again, everybody that tuned in. You can find me at Roto Street Wolf. All our content is at rotostreetjournal.com. We're still churning out tons of stuff this offseason, continually updating the rankings, going to be debuting some new look, new devs. So pumped for this offseason. So keep following along at rotostreetjournal.com and at Roto Street Wolf for all those updates. Anything you want to plug, Mo, before we pump off?
Keep your eyes out. There will be several pieces throughout the offseason, an in-depth look at the running back position, with the first one that should be out in the next few days with my initial stances and thoughts before we hit the NFL draft.
Yeah, awesome. Keep your eyes peeled. And yeah, next week, 4 p.m., our talking point is going to be most volatile like roles and or player values right now that are attached to those roles. We talked about the Chargers receiver 1 tonight, the Chargers backfield probably on that list as well if somebody overtakes Gus. So some definite, that's going to be a fun list to come up with and discuss ahead of next week's draft. So tune on in if you enjoy that type of stuff. Next week, 4 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be live with that topic and then yet another draft ahead of the NFL draft. So and are we going to get every Monday? I wonder if we'll hit every Monday before the season. I'd say we only missed 2 total. We'll see.
We're starting out strong. And
yeah.
It's March, so I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but it's a strong start. I'll say that.
Hell yeah. Awesome, Mo. Well, thanks again. I'll send you the draft right away. And thanks again for everybody that was here tuning in. We really appreciate you watching in this off season and supporting the boys over here. So, and a wolf of any sheep, be that wolf, guys. Later.